I'm in voice general if you want. Oh god damn it. Okay, I'll just hear him out. I'll just hear you out. I'll hear you out. Fuck. Oh god. Oh Jesus Christ. What's up, dude?
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
All right. So you're a Jordan Peterson fanboy. Is you said how big of a fan are you?
Well, I read 12 Rules for Life probably twice now, because I'll skip back and forth between different chapters. Um, so I want to give kind of like a better basis. So I consume two people's content the most. That would be Jordan Peterson and Destiny. Like those are like the two people I go
Oh
to,
my
and
god.
they,
How do you deal? I mean, Jordan Peterson does sound like Destiny sometimes, so I guess it makes sense.
well, okay. So the way I do it is I rarely listen to. Okay, so I can't remember how Destiny explains it, but basically, Jordan Peterson makes like a lot of like normative claims, or he talks about the facts, but he never puts them towards anything, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So he's like,
he never makes any declarative statements that but the way he describes normative facts uh make it seem as though like the way he lays out the normative facts makes it seem as though he has a perspective. And if you dive deep enough into his commentary, you know that he has a perspective. And in some instances, like the video that we watched earlier when you weren't on stream about like a gay marriage, for example, like the intellectual way he dances around the subject, a subject that is like that shows any reasonable human being that he may or may not have some bigoted perspectives on issues, makes me feel as though he's a regular social conservative hiding behind, you know, like objective intellectual rhetoric, like seemingly
yeah,
objective intellectual rhetoric.
yeah, I can understand why it would look like that, but I think generally, um, I guess the way I see it is he I
I
don't know. I
don't
get the
no. By
gut
the way, I
feeling
don't
that
think
he's
Destiny
really
does that.
not.
That's not what I was saying.
Oh no, I was just saying that I generally don't get the idea that he's like a closeted fucking like racist Republican. Um,
I mean, he's a
and
Republican, that's for sure. He's definitely
I'm pretty
social
sure he's
conservative.
voted that. I mean, like even
Well, he's
today on
Canadian. He
stream,
can't vote
this.
anything.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, but I mean, like even today on stream, Destiny's like, well, I'm probably a centrist, but I'm never voting for Republican, right? And I feel like Jordan Peterson's probably in a similar boat, which is
I
like,
mean, we don't have to engage in probabilities. I can find I can find different moments where he's expressed support for a particular party, or at least like a Republican over a Democrat. But that's not even my perspective. Like I don't even care about whether he would vote for Donald Trump or not. I think that he absolutely is a social conservative, uh, and that much is true. It's not just like off of his normative. I think if I show you one video that we looked at earlier, which I hate to do it again, but the video. Have you ever seen his video on gay marriage?
no, most of what I delve into is a lot of his like self help stuff. Um,
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, I don't shit on anyone for doing that. I think well for me, my perspective has always been that I am extremely skeptical of every single fucking self help guru. I think all of self help, the entirety of self help, leading all the way back to fucking how to win friends and influence people, is all bullshit. I think
Well,
that they.
I look at more of like the philosophical side, and then a lot of introspection that goes into that as well. And I'm sure generally a lot of it might be like kind of hocus pocus bullshit to sell books and whatnot. Like I read a Reddit post the other day where a dude is like, yeah, my friend just writes self help books under different pen names and sells them for like $2 or $3 a piece, and he has no degrees, he does nothing, he just literally sits in his room all day and writes like different self help books.
Yeah,
So
I
so
mean
I
it's
understand
understandable.
that.
Yeah, no, like Tony Robbins, like all those fuckers, dude. Every single person that writes self help books, like, first of all, the overwhelming majority of them literally make a living by telling you how to live. And but it's like what are you teaching them also to write self help books? Because that's literally how you became fucking successful. You know what I mean? So unless you're
Yeah.
giving the fucking secret away by telling them like, oh, this is how you become a grifter, then it's probably bullshit. You know what I mean? Uh,
Yeah, but I think there's a difference between that dude on Reddit and Jordan Peterson, who's like a psychologist with a degree and a professor. And even though like he's
sure,
got some pretty extremist views, like C16 views, for example, which
which
I
were
don't know where if
wholeheartedly
I
wrong.
it,
No,
I
no, no.
don't even want to
Not
get
not
into it because I don't.
No, no, I don't mean like wrong in the moral sense. I mean wrong in in his interpretation of the legislation was either inadvert like either he was unaware that he was misinforming people, or he was actively misinforming people on purpose, and like kind of capitalized on that momentum, and that kind of guided him and his perspective. Or maybe he was like socially conservative across the board, and then he decided to come out against it, and then that like blew up, and a lot of people started respecting him, and like the anti-SJW YouTube kind of like made him their champion. But the
Yeah.
reason why I say it's wrong is that his interpretation was so wrong that the Canadian Bar Association literally had to come out with a statement and address it, because it became such a large issue in Canada and also in the United States. This misinterpretation of a law that had already existed in other territories in Canada, and it was simply an expansion upon, or a more specific expansion upon existing law that existed in other territories that Jordan Peterson decided to actively misinterpret. Um, so that's what I meant when I said it was wrong. I didn't mean like, oh, it's moral. It's immoral for him to
Yeah.
rail against like trans people. I mean like it literally was a wrong interpretation. I don't know if he did it on purpose, or maybe he didn't do it on purpose, but it was a wrong interpretation, so wrong that the Canadian Bar Association literally had to write a statement about it.
Yeah. I just pretty much I skipped all of that because I don't actually give a shit about Canadian law, and I understand that like probably his views might be guided by like bigotry, but I think there's a bit more sincerity to him than a lot of people give. Like I don't know. People like Destiny, for example, argue that he's just like this huge closeted racist that won't just come out and say like, oh, like fuck gay people and fuck trans people, right? I really don't think that that's what it is. I don't think that that's his stance on it, and I think all of his views are um, guided by the stuff that he's researched, which in general is not always conclusive, right? There are a few papers that he cites, which he goes, hey, this has thousands and thousands of citations on it, which if you have a paper as an academic that has 100 citations, like that's a big deal. So he cites like these specific papers to push, I don't even want to say it's an argument. It's more of like a narrative. And so I don't know. I don't get that insincerity of like him being like a huge closeted fuck trans people kind of guy.
Um, Yeah, I can't speak on his like opinion on trans stuff. I'm not even super familiar with like what his entire perspective is. Like, I don't think he goes as far as like Ben Shapiro and like declares all out that like all trans people are mentally handicapped or some shit. You know what I mean? Um, like I don't think he goes that far. I was just simply stating that his mischaracterization of like a relatively tame piece of legislation became such a serious subject of discussion, and then people, because like people literally took everything he was saying for at face value, and started distributing that information as if it was like truth. That it probably, and I don't know if you can argue against this, it probably made trans people's lives a lot worse, not just in Canada but in the United States as well. You know what I mean? Because like
Yeah.
every time that sort of stuff comes up, every time that sort of stuff is like a matter of controversy, and people are hysterical about, and people are hysterical about like Jordan Peterson or whatever, or like the fact that if I misgender someone, I'm gonna fucking go to jail or whatever. That has real human consequences, and those consequences oftentimes are that trans people get even further oppressed or further marginalized, and that, from the studies that we can look at, directly contribute to their suicide rate.
Okay, I'm gonna. Whew, I don't know as much about this as I want to before going into this, but it's obvious that this is kind of the conversation that you want to have. So I don't know if I agree with it, but I'll play at least devil's advocate and try to come up with the Jordan Peterson side of the argument, as far as I understand it. Which, as far as my understanding of it, is that he just doesn't like the idea of compelled speech. When he went around telling people that if the law passed and we didn't call a trans person by their preferred pronoun, then we were going to go to jail. That's like the extension of like the final like tree, basic like tree of options that you can take, right? So let's say that you called a trans person by a pronoun that they don't prefer, and in a form it's a harassment, and then that person is then reported. The person is then taken to court and fined, and then if you don't pay that fine, there's a number of things that can happen. One of which is jail time, which the law never strictly states that you will never go to jail for using the wrong pronoun. It says you will be fined, and generally, if you don't pay a fine and it goes on long enough, you can in fact go to jail for it. And I think that he took that like logical conclusion at like the very end of like this multi-step process, and that's what he pushed. And it's a little bit of sensationalism maybe, but generally, and this is another problem that I have with a lot of Destiny's arguments, is he likes to forget about, or he likes to downplay the importance of precedents. Okay, so if we set this precedent of compelled speech, right, where nobody's gone to jail yet, and nobody probably will go to jail, but the fact that it could happen technically, that's scary for a lot of people. And the same thing happens when what's the other one that his views on deplatforming people, for example, which he just goes, well, I think if somebody is spreading lots of lies and stuff, which is completely reasonable, we should deplatform those people so that they can't spread those lies and grow on social media, and then those ideas and harmful things continue to propagate.
Do you mean Destiny or Jordan Peterson?
It's like a do you kind of understand where I'm going with this?
Can you not hear me? Oh shit, I muted myself. Oh my god, I was like asking you a question and you kept going. I was like, damn, like he's just fucking steamrolling through this. Okay. No, I said, do you mean Destiny or Jordan Peterson? Who's the when you were talking about deplatforming?
So Jordan Peterson's argument is basically a precedent argument, which is like, I don't like this precedent of compelled speech because the law. What
do you mean?
Deplatforming is Destiny's thing.
Oh, okay, good. So what would you say if I were to tell you that precedent already existed, not just in Canada, but in specific instances in the United States as well, and it existed in multiple territories across Canada, and that this precedent was only being applied in an additional part of Canada, a part that Jordan Peterson wasn't even, I believe, wasn't even going to be affected by. He was already, the area that Jordan Peterson lives in and exists in already has that precedent, because the Bill C-16 is simply, in the simplest terms, in layman terms, is an extension upon previous hate crime. Like, because Canada, don't think about this from an American perspective. Canada already technically has compelled speech. Do you know what I mean? Like they already have hate. They already have hate speech restrictions, which essentially just add a multiplier or an aggravator if you misgender someone actively, and it's like beyond a reasonable doubt that you hated this person for being trans, and then you attack them, then it's just an aggravating factor. And this law already existed in Canada. It was just being added on to I believe another territory. So that was really what was interesting to me, is that like a lot of Americans don't understand that hate speech already, like there is hate speech restrictions in Canada. This wasn't new. Do you see what I'm saying? It was just simply adding on a trans measure, like an anti-trans measure. It's not necessarily that you're walking down the street and you go up to someone and you say, hey dude, and it's a woman and it's a trans woman, and they say, oh my god, you misgendered me, I'm going to the police. Like, it doesn't work like that. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah,
I understand. It was like a severe harassment thing.
Yeah, if you're severely harassing, or if you're discriminating someone at the basis as an employer, or if you're severely discriminating someone at the basis or as a property owner or whatever, you know what I mean? Those are the instances where you can, you can have an aggravating additional factor added onto your, added onto your punishment, I guess. And as Garland put in here, the summary of the bill from the Canadian website says that this enactment amends the Canadian Human Rights Act to add gender identity and gender expression to the list of prohibited grounds of discrimination. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily like compelled speech. The only way you would think about it is like, because speech is already compelled. If you want to think about any sort of restriction, speech is already compelled. In Canada, this already existed. This was just adding gender identity on top of that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like, because I know it's come up, and I'm trying to remember the way that he worded it, because there was somebody who had already brought this up with him directly, and I can't remember which interview it was, but he compared the law including gender identities and gender expression, and compared it to the existing laws, which encompassed like the hate speech against Black people and minorities, or I guess the protected, what's it called, protected
Protected
classes.
class. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going through like small nicotine withdrawals, so I'm forgetting probably a lot of minor things.
It's fine. I'm chewing nicotine gum as we speak.
Whew, I wish I had some. So I think the way that he combated it was the oh man, I would have to look it up again. But like I said, this isn't really
Well, let
the
me ask you
conversation.
something. I mean, we didn't even have to talk about this, but like, I mean, because if you were to come out strongly in defense of Jordan Peterson and use this and say like, well, he's right on this, then I would further question you and probe you and say, well, how the fuck can you say you support this perspective if you don't have the appropriate knowledge to back up your claims? But you already literally started out by saying, I don't really know too much about that. I don't really care about it. I don't think he's right on it even. Like you were already giving concessions before we started. So I'm going to let you off the hook on that one for sure. The reason why I mentioned it, like I said, and this isn't even, like the reason why I mentioned it isn't because I think that Jordan Peterson is like right or wrong about compelling speech or whatever. The reason why I mentioned it is because I think that his misrepresentation of this law is probably made the lives of an already existing marginalized group of people a lot worse. That's not even the only reason, though. The reason that I don't like Jordan Peterson is because, like I said, he's a social conservative who masks his true social conservatism behind the rhetoric of academia, where he makes it seem as though he is objective and unbiased and dealing with empirical data, and that he does not have any sort of political perspective that is guiding him, or he does not base any of this off of his personal ideology. And then that mentality also seeps in to his books. If you told me you read 12 Rules of Life, so maybe you can talk about this a little bit better and clarify it. But to my knowledge, I believe like even the analogy, and he deals in metaphors a lot, right? Like this is something that he loves. He loves to do the fucking Jungian, Christian traditionalism, basically. And to my knowledge, like even cleaning your room, basically, or like and this is something I've heard him say even, where he says, get your house in order before you criticize others, is actually an analogy, or better yet, a rule of life, I guess, telling people to shut the fuck up about societal problems and fix themselves individually and like worry about their own individual issues. Right? Am I mistaken?
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is.
So, okay, so if I obviously have an issue with him being a social conservative, and I've heard him fucking rail against collectivism a lot. Right? Like all manner of collective action. I'm gonna do the Jordan Peterson voice for you. Maybe this will be more receptive. All manner of collective action is essentially guided by personal vindication. It's just envy. It's jealousy, and it's not good. Well, you're gonna say
that's pretty good at the end.
Yeah. And that's his position on collective action, which is why. It's very easy to fucking get him on his back, like even Jim Jeffries, who's not that smart, did when he interviewed Jordan Peterson and was like, "Wait, you think all manner of collective action is bad?" And he's like, "Yes." And then he was like, "Well, what about the Civil Rights Act?" And then he had to shut the fuck up about it for like 3 minutes because he hasn't really thought it through. It seems to me like he doesn't really. I mean, he's very good. He's a very skilled orator. But he's socially conservative and he wants to preserve the status quo because it benefits him. And beyond that, I think he's doing a great job by reaching out to a lot of single men or a lot of straight men in general, and and kind of guiding them, albeit gently, towards, by being a paternal figure, towards a lighter form of social conservatism, whether they're a liberal or conservative.
Yeah.
So that's my issue with him.
Have you ever watched any of his like circle jerk sessions with like Ben Shapiro or
some of them?
Who's the guy that you debated at Politicon?
Charlie Kirk. I don't think he's ever met Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, he did a thing with Charlie Kirk at some
Oh, Jesus
thing.
Christ.
Um, and Charlie Kirk was like, "Oh man, we loved watching you destroy that like Channel 4 news lady." And he's like, "I didn't do that, and that wasn't fun." And so like okay, so the trend would you watch his like circle jerk sessions with people who are on the right, you know, not super far on the right or like very far on the right. You'll notice a trend of him going like, "I don't like agree with you guys on everything like at all." So I think I think you're definitely right when you say that it's like a very mild social conservatism.
No, I don't think he's mildly social conservative. I think he's definitely hiding his woke powers, his woke power levels. You know what I mean? Because some of the stuff that he says about Christian traditionalism are really like almost fundamentalist. Or the way he almost fancies for this mythical time where like as if it would solve the problem with like women in the workplace if they were to just admit to themselves that they just want to have a more traditional lifestyle where they, you know, fucking take care of children at home. That to me is like pretty fucking Christian traditionalist, if not fundamentalist. And he won't come
Okay,
out
wait,
and
wait,
outright
wait.
say it. He'll just say, well, women are fundamentally different than men, right? I mean, they're very good at child rearing, so they have different skills that you know, psychopaths are very good in the workplace or whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? Like he never outright will say like women are terrible in the workplace or women are not having a good time in the workplace, they just want to have children, but he alludes to it by using like very specific normative claims, some of which is junk science. A lot of it, especially if he's borderline, if he's like talking about psychology, is real clinical psychology.
Okay, I watched that's not a good way to start that. Okay. Oh, I'm trying to find like a good place to start because I don't agree with you. But I don't know where a good place to start would be. Let's start with how he views women in the workplace, right? So generally, you're right with him making a lot of these like normative claims. Generally, the one that he makes is that women are happier, usually at what was it, like lower paying social jobs or something. He gives this like very specific statistic that he gives it in almost every single interview that it's asked about. You are claiming that a lot of what he says that isn't like clinical psychology is can sometimes be junk science.
Oh yeah.
Do you have like a specific occurrence of this so that
Yeah. So in a lecture in his class that we watched together on this stream, he started off his statement about violence between women and men, and his opening statement was that I believe it was that women cause more violence domestically, but it doesn't get reported. And we looked through it like it was we looked through like a fuckload of studies on the stream. It took like fucking 25-35 minutes, like, and almost every single study, and there was virtually no study that showed that statement. But and then he continued to follow through with it, and he said, well, you know, there's no evidence on this because if I am a man, I'm physically superior to a woman. If I strike a woman, then it's certainly going to be you know, a domestic issue. But if a woman strikes me, you laugh it off or something like that. So that is damaging junk science. That's not even like, you know what I mean? He's relying on your personal biases in that subject to make statements that go against actual trends and actual data. Because when people collect domestic violence studies, or when people are looking at domestic violence instances, they don't necessarily, like, it's literally a call to the police. Do you see what I'm saying? Meaning it could be anything from like someone punching you to like women using objects to strike you. So it doesn't matter if women are physically inferior to men in that instance. And by the way, the difference wasn't marginal. It was massive. It was massive. So for me, a statement like that heavily relies on you making it up, making the rest of that information up in your mind because of your personal biases, because he ties it along to like things that are real. Like he says, I'm a man and men are physically more powerful on average than women. That's a true statement, right? But the original, the front part of that statement is not true. So, but it sounds right. And when someone makes statements like that, it kind of is frustrating to me, and I start questioning the legitimacy of their other arguments as well. This is literally what I talked about with the Ben Shapiro Civil Rights Act video earlier today, too.
I want to backtrack for a second because I should have been more clear. I was wondering if you had like a specific example as far as the women in the workplace stuff, or like the statistics that he gives around.
Oh. No,
I want to stay on this workplace, this women in the workplace thing, because that's a huge point of contention for like you and Destiny bring it up all the fucking time.
I don't bring it up all the time.
That,
this is the first time I've brought up women in the workplace. But I mean, I can talk about it. The women in the workplace thing I'm thinking of is like, for example, the lipstick stuff, right? The thing that really frustrates me that I never even considered when I listened to the unedited, like longer version of that that very famous Vice interview at this point, was when he just like throws out that assertion that like women are, putting on makeup to make themselves more sexually desirable. I think, what was Destiny's counter argument? I think it was like fucking, well, what about men who shave their faces or whatever? Or what about makeup being considered a uniform, right? I think that's what he said. Well, beyond that, what about fucking workplaces where like there are exclusively women? Like, does that mean they're trying to fuck the other women then at that point? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's so silly to be like, no, women are putting on makeup exclusively to be more sexually desirable. It is a really primitive way of looking at it. And again, it always strikes me as like someone who, even as a clinical researcher, refuses to go out and like actually do the fucking research and just like throws these broad declarative statements that correspond to reality, but in fact they actually just correspond to your internal biases. It sounds right enough, so you're not going to question it.
Yeah, I think there might be like a bit of a straw man there.
Why?
In the argument, in the interview, the Vice interview, he specifically says, he's like, I don't think that stopping women from wearing makeup in the workplace is ideal, but it makes for a good.
Well, he said it's hypocritical if a woman gets sexually assaulted in the workplace and she's wearing makeup. It's hypocritical. It's very difficult very difficult to look at that statement and say, I don't know. He probably meant like, I mean, that's literally the asking for it mentality, which is, by the way, if you assume that Jordan Peterson's a socially conservative person like I do, you're not shocked by that statement because that's social conservatives do that all the fucking time. You know what I mean?
No, you're not. But I think we're taking like one thing and missing the bigger picture, which the bigger picture he paints is like, listen, there's a lot of rules that we haven't figured out yet. Like, for example, we have some in the workplace nowadays, which is like generally like, no PDA in the workplace, no public displays of affection. That's a rule that, I mean, is that necessarily like needed? The point he was trying to make with that whole argument. Yeah, and that's great, and like we can have that conversation. The point that he was trying to make with his argument was that we need to be having those conversations because we don't have men and women working in the workplace together efficiently and harmoniously figured out all the way. So we can start with these basic things like, oh, well, what about makeup? Should women be allowed to wear makeup? Okay, well, should men be allowed to wear shorts? Should women be allowed to wear, I don't know, pantsuits? like these are the conversations that he says that we should have in order to help figure out and get a better workplace.
Yeah,
He's never once said that like.
There's two problems I have with that, right? One is the fact that placing the burden on women in a sexual assault situation because they're wearing makeup is really damaging. It's not true at all. And then following that up with a justification that makes you seem like you've literally never talked to a woman ever in your life to literally ask them, hey, why do you wear makeup? You know what I mean? Is weird. But then my second point would be, this is kind of like nitpicking. Let's say that women and men are equal in that instance, and they're not the ones who are being in a sexual assault situation more often than not. Let's say that it's 50-50 split down the line. turning around and asking questions about things that are already established and things that most normal human beings would never think that way about. And makeup is again what I'm referring to here. Um, is strange, is not only strange, but it reeks of fundamentalism. And I say this as someone who grew up in a Muslim country, and even in that Muslim country, women and men work harmoniously in the workplace, and women wear makeup. And if someone literally were to be like, women shouldn't wear makeup in the workplace, maybe because like there's a lot of issues going on in the workplace, and maybe women shouldn't wear makeup, we would laugh them out of the room because we would be like, what are you, a fucking Sharia maniac? Get the fuck out of here. Which is why when I see a white person like Jordan Peterson doing it, I'm always shocked. I'm like, why aren't people so like why aren't people immediately seeing the red flags here?
Because he brings it up as an example.
I know, but
okay, remember how I prefaced the C16 one with like, hey, I don't know what I'm talking about and I don't know a lot about this, but I will do my best to humor you. He does the exact same thing with the makeup argument. He's like, I don't believe that makeup is a discussion that we necessarily need to have. I don't agree that we should stop women from wearing makeup in the workplace, but it makes an interesting example because
he does have a stance on it, no?
Yeah, I guess he might have a. I don't know, dude.
He said it's
I'm a little tired.
No, I mean he literally said it's hypocritical if you're a woman and you wear makeup. It's hypocritical if you get sexually assaulted, which implies that you were literally asking for it if you had makeup on.
Yeah, and I'm not going to defend that statement because that's a super fuck up there. And I'm like a pretty liberal dude. I don't agree with what he said there.
Oh, okay.
Like,
no,
I'm not defending that.
It's not even like. But if he's doing that, then it seems to me like it's not. I mean, he obviously has a perspective on it, and he's bringing that out. It's not just like a random question. It's not like he's just saying, oh, yeah, well, what about makeup? Or what about men wearing shorts? Like, he's not saying that. He's saying, well, makeup. And then when the guy further asks him a question and says, is a woman, if a woman wears makeup and it reports a sexual assault, they're being hypocritical? And he says, yes. That's pretty obvious that he is literally saying makeup is a problem in the workplace, maybe. But since you since you and I and the overwhelming majority of people who live in civilized society, including other cultures, understand that wearing makeup isn't necessarily a way for it isn't necessarily an excuse for you to get for you to get sexually assaulted. The fact that he has a strong perspective on that as well, it goes beyond maybe. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what I was saying. And think about the amount of time we just spent trying to go through point by point with like what Jordan Peterson's perspective is. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that his perspective is a lot more nuanced than people break it down to be. So I appreciate you taking the time to go through each.
But no, and I have, dude. I mean, this accent isn't just the consequence of me fucking being good at like doing impersonations. It's because I've listened to hundreds of hours of Jordan Peterson's lectures and also read a fuckload of his material, whatever I could. The Maps of Meaning shit is a fucking awful garbage read and impossible to interpret. But not the 12 Rules, but the other book that he wrote. So. But what I was saying is like I know what his perspective is. I disagree with it. I'm not here saying like he's a fucking Nazi or whatever. All I'm saying, the reason why I criticize him is because I hate people like Sam Harris and people like fucking Jordan Peterson who very clearly have biases, but they feel as though they are, or they represent themselves as though they are above those biases in a way to reach out to liberals like yourself and slowly gateway you into opening up your perspective to more left-wing ideas. More right-wing ideas, while they also actively vilify the left to make it seem as though they are single-handedly responsible for the decay of Western civilization. Now, if we're to talk about that even more, then I can start describing to you exactly the ways that some of the rhetoric of Jordan Peterson is nearly identical to the way fascists interpret certain things, or the way fascists use certain things that are happening in society as a vehicle to launch their nefarious ideas. Jordan Peterson is outwardly said multiple times that he fucking hates Nazis and whatever. So I'm not saying he's a Nazi, even though Nazis do say that they're not Nazis all the time. But it is alarming to me that he is increasingly saying stuff that certainly dog whistles to some of the worst fucking people. And also he's essentially platforming it. I mean, he's essentially normalizing certain concepts that really are threatening because of his approach, because of how palatable he is to liberals and people in the middle.
All right. Here's the deal. We can go like as deep as you want. Spend as much time talking about this that you want. The deeper we go, the farther out of my depth I'm going to be. So if we do that, I will want like a follow up later so that I have time to absorb the information that you give me.
Sure.
Do some research on it, and then we can come back and revisit the topic. And maybe I'll agree with you more. Maybe I'll agree with you less. But yeah. As long as you give me the opportunity to come back after a little bit more research, then
sure,
definitely we can keep going for as long as you want.
Yeah. But yeah. Earlier in the stream, you can watch my VOD if you want. I literally after this conversation is over, you can go back to the earlier. Yeah, you can go back to the earlier part of the stream and look through the VOD where I talked to my friend. My best friend was a big fan of Jordan Peterson, and like his perspective has like kind of changed a little bit throughout time, but he still defended him in a lot of instances. So maybe you can go back to that VOD and maybe you'll have a different perspective if you watch it. But the Nazi stuff I don't feel like getting into because it's really long, and like and I have to give you the tools. Like I have to equip you with the tools to understand like fascist rhetoric and like how to identify like when you're talking to a fascist and blah blah blah, like all this shit. And this isn't like me making this stuff up. This is like actual like sociologists and political theorists, political scientists, like all just numerous just various amounts of research that have been conducted on this. So I don't want to get into it because like if I don't explain this to you, it's going to be very difficult. You're going to be like, no, that's whatever. You know what I mean? You're going to be like, well, that's not denial. That's not Nazi denialism. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I am going to college right now for political sciences. So.
Oh, nice. Where are you going to college?
It's just Salt Lake Community College. It's just like the shittiest college in Utah, but it's cheap as hell.
Are you a Mormon?
No.
Oh, okay. I mean, I don't know. You like Jordan Peterson, so I just it wouldn't be that far off.
Yeah, maybe not that far off. I do know a lot of Mormon guys who like Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, no shit. But generally, he's a Christian traditionalist. Of course, they like him.
Yeah, and I think when he presents like those views to they're presented in a very different way than how a lot of like other Christian traditionalists have presented them. Like for example, you know that he's been coming out with those like takes on the Bible or whatever. What are they called? What is that series called? He's basically breaking down Bible stories and trying to and putting them through like a different lens or like his clinical psychology.
I don't know, man. Aren't you the fucking Jordan Peterson expert here? I don't know.
Maybe. I don't really give a shit about the Bible, so I haven't watched a whole lot of them. I watched which one was it? I watched one of them, but it was a long time ago. But anyway, no, I think that I think that what he presents is very, very, and that it doesn't appeal to people who might be interested in leaning more right. And I've noticed that a few of my stances have been a little more right-leaning since involving myself with him so deeply. But generally, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. There are certain things that the right presents that are very bad, but I also believe that there are certain things that the left presents that are very bad. I think the right has far more, and they're much worse. But I feel like I'm making the like, oh, there's good people on both sides, there's bad people on both sides argument, and I fucking hate that. But when it comes to like
people are calling you out for it already in the chat.
Oh man, it feels bad. But I feel like on certain policies that really is like the truth, and saying that
like
it's not makes you like let's go with like gun control, for example. That's a pretty big one, right?
Okay.
With two like very distinct sides.
Wait,
one side
are
is
you
like,
are you gonna tell me what Jordan Peterson's like perspective is on gun control? Or are you telling me that like,
Oh no, I'm trying to validate my belief for good people on both. If you want, we can just drop
I
that.
mean,
But
there's redeemable elements if you fucking look hard enough in every idea. Like this is not a philosophical debate about dialectics. This is more so a conversation about Jordan Peterson. Like when I get mad at the fucking we laugh about like both sides shit, and it's kind of funny that Destiny and I both shit on both sides all the time. But that is a very reductive approach, yet a pretty similar fucking analogy to like the overwhelming majority of philosophy. You know what I mean? The golden mean is technically a fucking both sides argument. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
so it's not necessary. I'm not sitting here and I'm not gonna be like, oh well, no idea is even the most irredeemable ideas have a lesson in them. And but that's not what we're talking about. We're not having like a philosophical conversation. We're having a conversation about Jordan Peterson's perspective, right?
yeah, you're right. That's my bad. I got off top.
Yeah. So
Um,
I don't know why we're talking about gun control on
we
like.
start we started talking about let's see, we were talking about how you were going to equip me with the, or you didn't want to have to do that tonight, but equip me with the tools
Well,
to like spot a fascist. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to school for political science. And
oh,
then you asked
okay.
me if I was
Well,
Mormon.
here, what I was gonna tell you is, okay, whatever. I'll just do it. Fuck it. Okay. So there are certain things, and there are a couple YouTubers that are very good at this. Okay, there's Three Arrows is a really good YouTube channel. He talks about this briefly. ContraPoints has done a couple of stuff about like how to spot fascists and whatnot. And like ContraPoints is a PhD philosophy student. Like it's not like these people aren't fucking talking out of their asses. And they link all of their they link everything. They back everything up with like actual empirical data. So
Yeah, they're not
I
like
highly
Tonka.
recommend both of those videos. I'll link them in a second. But I'm just gonna give you like the broad overarching thing. Okay, so fascists can't, especially new fascists and Andrew Anglin and all these other like fucking neo Nazis and white supremacists, white nationalists, understand that fascism is by and large regarded as a bad thing, right? So the first thing is that they always distance themselves from the neo Nazis or the old school white supremacists, old school KKK dudes, because they're like, we have to operate on the internet, we have to operate under secrecy until it is the time to strike. And Charlottesville kind of was a moment for them to like mobilize and strike about it and whatever. Um, you know what I mean? So that was one thing. So like when someone says like, "Oh, I'm not a fascist, I hate Hitler," you're Hitler actually. That is usually not enough of a burden of proof to fucking for you to think like, oh, this person's probably not a fascist. Especially if there are a couple other things that they're talking about. Another way to spot fascist propaganda is Holocaust denial. Historical revisionism around Holocaust denial was such a useful method for Nazis to spread Nazi propaganda in the aftermath of fucking World War II that they literally, now when people say historical revisionism, that immediately triggers you. You're like, what the fuck? Like, that's a bad thing. Historical revisionism used to not be a bad thing. It was just what historians did. They would discuss ideas like fun, when looking at the Holocaust, for example, there's like two different schools of thought, like intentionalism versus functionalism, and
Mm-hmm.
and like because of historical revisionists like purposefully in bad faith uh, spreading falsehoods about the Holocaust to justify the Nazi actions and the Nazi ideology, there's now literally a cultural it's like used as a pejorative. Historical revisionism is used as a pejorative, even though that wasn't the case in the back in the day. So
Yeah.
they do that. Holocaust denial is another one of those ways that you can immediately spot a fascist or a Nazi or a white supremacist or a white nationalist. Oftentimes, they will start questioning the legitimacy of the Holocaust, or they will start justifying the necessity of the Holocaust. So that's a really really good one. And then and you know about the actions of Hitler specifically. And there's a video here that we can watch again, I guess, even though like everyone in the fucking chat has already probably seen this video and they're gonna get mad at me for replaying it. But it's a short video and I can send it to you and you can watch it at the same time if you can't hear it over my microphone. But it's a video in which Jordan Peterson's on the H3H3 podcast where he does something that is kind of, it's a little fashy. Do you see what I'm saying? Where he Well, watch the video,
Oh yeah,
and I want to hear
it's
your.
one of those classic like maybe situations, right? Where the maybe absolves him of
No,
like
it's not. No.
confirm.
It's not. It's not a maybe situation. It's not. It's literally, it's historical revisionism. It's revising the. Uh, Hold on, I don't know what's going on. People are
You're good.
being. Sorry. What? No. Sorry. People are being banned or something in like in the chat, so they're like getting mad at me. I don't know. Okay, where is it? Footage this emerged this week from a podcast this recorded last year on the Holocaust. There was normal equating of fascist and Antifa on account of the latter's proclivity of violence. Yeah, that's another. I mean, anyway, hold on.
Yeah, usually I would just ask you to like tell me what he says, but generally he's like super careful with his words, so I'd like to hear it from myself before
Oh
we.
no. And yeah, this is a fucking big statement. So I don't want to just like say, "Oh, he said this," and paraphrase it, because we are. And if you're in this happens with a lot of people who even a little bit like who even like Jordan Peterson a little bit. They end up like defending his statements until we exhaust every fucking available option until they're like, okay, maybe, but he's not that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So hold on. Okay. I'm looking at it again. Okay. Where is the fucking video? Here it is. So
resentful and hateful because
can you hear this?
the Germans had plenty of reason to be resentful and hateful because
Yeah.
I mean, think about what they went through. We can't even imagine it. First of all, there was World War I, and so there was many men like Hitler himself who served in the trenches. And there's one story about Hitler. He won a medal for heroism in World War I, and he was sitting around with a group of his buddies and went off to do something, God only knows what. And when he came back, they were all dead because a mine had, not a mine, I don't remember, some kind of shell had landed in the middle of them and killed them all. It's like, that changes you.
Yeah.
You know, and then afterwards, there was all these brutalized men who'd come out of the trenches. I mean, you just can't imagine what it must have been like in the trenches, you know, especially if you were there for like a couple of years. You weren't the same person. Get out of there, you're unemployed, your country's in ruins. Then the hyperinflation hits, and every single person in Germany who ever saved any money at all is flat, bloody broke. And then there's a communist revolution brewing in Russia, and it's like, it's hell. And the Nazis came along and said, well, not only are...
So up to this point is what a lot of people get upset at. They're like, what the fuck? What are you, sympathizing with Hitler? I don't give a fuck about that, okay?
Yeah, no, that seems all reasonable.
Yeah, it's a little weird.
He's basically just Hitler backstory.
Yeah.
Because all of that is true. Plus,
I know.
Speculation.
It's some of it's speculation, some of it's true. It's still a little weird that he's like, you're like, what is he building up to? This is the part that I actually have. Okay, Vinny Mood already said that. This sounds like a guy thinking about it as a clinical psychologist. Okay, here's the part that I have issue with. It's coming now.
Are we going to restore order and greatness, but we're going to bloody well tell you whose fault this is. It's like, and Hitler, I've studied him a lot trying to understand what happened. And Hitler was, Carl Jung called him the mouthpiece of the collective unconscious of the German people. So you imagine there's all this resentment and hatred brewing underneath the surface, and all this chaos is there, and the desire for order is like clamoring in everyone's minds. And Hitler comes along, and he's a very powerful emotional orator. And he's watching the crowd, and he listens. And when he says thing A, nothing happens. And when he says thing B, everybody roars.
Do you get it? Are you spotting the problem here or no?
Not necessarily.
Okay, hold on. Let me just
And so he takes note of that, and it's not even conscious exactly, right? Because he's being molded by the crowd, and so they.
So okay, you didn't get it.
Okay, yeah, now I got it.
Okay, so describe to me what the problem is with that statement.
The problem is he's it's that idea that the statement that he used, being molded by the crowd. He's saying that he didn't make those actions of himself. He is
he's a demagogue.
The fault.
Hitler simply
the fault is not his own.
And taking advantage of the brewing hostility towards Jews. Right? That's
yeah.
Yeah, that's categorically false. That's the point I was making. That to me is textbook. I mean, that to me is like textbook, like changing, like that's textbook historical revisionism. Yes, of course there was, of course there was anti-Semitism, but Hitler, before he even rose to power, was actively writing and talking about his perspective and his ideology and what he wanted to do, what he wanted to achieve.
Yeah, that's why we have Mein Kampf.
Yeah, so that exactly. So if someone has studied Hitler to this extent, and he's talked about how much he studied Hitler, right? To this extent, grossly misrepresents the reality that. So if you're not 100% familiar with history, you're a fascist? No. What are you talking about? Someone in the chat is like saying.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
I'm reading chat too.
Yeah. Okay. If someone, and this is a very important distinction to make, is whether Hitler demagogued on existing anti-Semitism, or Hitler was literally guided. He was just simply, he was just simply, what do you call it? He was just simply fucking listening to the crowd, and he was guided almost in an unconscious fashion. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a huge.
Yeah, that is apologia, essentially. That's basically apologizing. Anyway.
Okay, and then the claim, or you're not claiming that this proves that he is a fascist.
No,
you're saying that it points to him maybe being.
No, I'm not saying he's a fascist either. I'm saying that his rhetoric mirrors fascists. Do you see what I'm saying? He doesn't say unconscious. Yes, he does, Vinny Moo. He says it right here.
He takes note of that, and it's not even conscious exactly, right? Because
not even conscious.
He did. I mean, what do you mean not even conscious is?
I guess it's technically not unconscious.
I mean, come on,
because he didn't say unconscious.
Like, he's implying that Hitler was guided by the statement. Like, I mean, he was guided by the reaction from the crowd, and that he didn't personally have this sort of anti-Semitism rooted firmly in his own personal ideology, beyond the anti-Semitism that was already occurring.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Now I'm going to ask you a question. It's this type of clip where you show that he has, like, I don't know, how did you describe it again? Like, not fascist talking points, but they're like
this kind of rhetoric coming from someone who is accepted in civilized society as a fucking, literally someone who is hailed as a new age philosopher king. This kind of rhetoric is incredibly damaging because it emboldens fascists, because it is literally identical to what fascists say and do in an effort to justify, or at least it's not always about justification. It first starts off with eradicating the stigma associated with what Hitler has done, and then you move over to, like, well, it's kind of justified, I mean, well, the Jews did control all of the banks. I mean, technically it's because, they were allowed to charge usury, or they were allowed to engage in usury, and it wasn't a sin that in Judaism that you could loan money off the people and blah, blah, blah. And it's Holocaust denialism, which is illegal, by the way, in a lot of countries. But it is not only is this the first step towards it, it's very effective. And he's not doing it in, like, a very overt way, but yeah, it's essentially that, and it's really damaging because Jordan Peterson's status, and because Jordan Peterson, like, his level.
Well, like, how many of these clips do you like? I'm not gonna make you do this. That would be ridiculous. But let's say I was like, okay, next clip, show me another example. How many examples do you think you could get to?
I have some from
before, like, we'd run out. Just give me like a ballpark, an educated guess.
I have no idea. Probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 that, like, very long ones where he goes in depth into. I mean, I don't know how many examples do you need?
No, I just wanted to know the ballpark number, because we're talking about somebody who's been on TV for the greater part of 3 years, has posted literally, like, every single lecture he's given over the past, like, 5 or 6 years. Like, so this is like hundreds, maybe thousands of hours of content, and you're like 4 or 5 examples. Some of those examples are really long-winded. Do you understand my contention with it?
So
I think there's a difference between
I
somebody.
can give you more than that. I mean, look, every time he talks about Nazism, he grossly misrepresents. Okay, this is the easy stuff. This is like the more overt shit. But he grossly misrepresents certain, like, it goes, as soon as it goes beyond functionalism versus intentionalism as a debate, which, by the way, like, most people who are like talking about functionalism are oftentimes on the, or like a functionalism is a justification technically. You know what I mean? And this is an old clip. Like, people are just starting to pick this apart now. One of the first people who ever engaged in his like complete misunderstanding or misrepresentation of Nazi ideology was Three Arrows, which is why I referenced them earlier. He did like a fucking 30-minute video. We can go through it, like, where he compiled a lot of his fucking videos and points out exactly what the flaws are. Now, he could, like, I wouldn't normally, and the reason why I'm saying like he's not a fucking fascist is because there are so many fucking memes of conservative people, right, that claim that, like, you know, Nazis were socialist in order to vilify socialism. You know what I mean? Or they'll say dumb shit like, well, gun control would have prevented the Holocaust if, you know, if they didn't have such strict gun laws. Like, I'm not considering that Holocaust denial, even though that is historical revisionism surrounding the Holocaust, right? There's like different layers to this. The reason why I think this is particularly damaging is because of Jordan Peterson's status and also perceived intellect and his perspective, his political perspective. People think he's like exclusively speaking an objective truth, not guided by any biases. That's my big issue with it. Because when
maybe
Steven
I'm
Crowder
making
does an entire fucking video like grossly misrepresenting or trying to fucking link socialism to Nazism, like, I don't give a fuck. I mean, I don't think he's a Nazi. He's just an idiot. You know what I mean? But like, Jordan Peterson has studied this his entire life, so it's very strange to me that even though he's studied Nazi ideology his entire life, he still has not fully understood it. It's very interesting.
Okay, maybe I'm having like a bit of a disconnect because there's something that I don't. Let's have. Can you walk me through the process of going from that clip we just watched, where Jordan Peterson says he's, you know, responding to the crowd unconsciously, basically. How does that claim lead to like Holocaust denial?
That claim is a tiny part of it.
How does that open the door?
Okay, so saying that essentially is a justification for Hitler just being it's I guess it's like shifting the burden away from Hitler. Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, everyone was anti-Semitic. Hitler was just capitalizing on anti-Semitism when he literally detailed in Mein Kampf what his perspective was. It wasn't him. And this is before he, read the room when he started fucking doing his speeches. So obviously, like, he was guiding the room, dude. It's not like he was fucking being led by the room. He was leading the room himself. Yeah. So
I understand. Okay, so now we've shifted the blame from Hitler to this like general like anti-Semitism.
Yes. General anti-Semitism. So that, like I said,
how does that lead to like Holocaust denial? Because now instead of like one person leading the way, we just have like, oh, everyone hates Jews.
Well,
how does that lead to Holocaust denial?
Well, wouldn't you say that it's a little bit? And then he's talking about the brooding anti-Semitism, and these are justifications for why anti-Semitism existed. He's like, well, the culture around it was just that way, I guess, at the time, and that, you know, there was serious economic struggles happening. You know what I mean? All of this. The end is the eradication of Jews. This makes it seem like the eradication of Jews is just the means to a different end. But the end of that kind of ideology is the eradication of Jews. So any sort of misrepresentation beyond that, any sort of way, any sort of effort to make it seem like that's not the case is historical revisionism.
Okay, now I hope I don't sound. I'm gonna sound like some like crazy alt-right. Like, whew. Okay, so my understanding is that the point of Hitler's Holocaust and killing the Jews, the end goal was a utopia. Granted that utopia was like no Jews and stuff and no hippies and whatever else gay people and people with disabilities and shit like that. So like you just claimed that the end goal was just to kill the Jews and whatnot, and those other classes, but the end goal stated that they stated was a utopia.
Yeah, a utopia in which those people did not exist. Do you get what I'm saying? That's the utopia.
Well, a
communist
didn't
utopia
they accredit
Look, let me like because this is something that he fucking misrepresents a lot too, Jordan Peterson. So let me just tell you this: a communist utopia is a classless society, right? A classless society. Now you can achieve that through
with one class.
No, you can achieve that through in the way that Stalin did, in a very violent way. You know what I'm saying? And that's not good. But the ultimate goal is a classless society. And I'm doing this is like a really simplified term where the working class owns the means of the production, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's an end goal that you can still achieve through nonviolent means. That won't necessarily be a harmful end goal. A utopia in which certain people cannot exist is always an ultimately violent utopia. Do you see what I mean? Now we're getting
didn't they directly accredit like the problems that any utopia in the future would have to those? It wasn't like we want a utopia and we just don't like these guys. It was like we want a utopia and we literally can't have one because these specific people are causing too many problems for that utopia to exist.
And that's not true. So what are you gonna like? You know what I mean?
I mean, like it wasn't like factually true, but it was their perception. So like, how did they come to that perception?
Well, wait.
That wasn't just a perception held by Hitler. That was a perception held by lots of people. The fact that like Jews and I can't remember it starts with an H. Your parents always threaten to sell you to them when you're a kid. They're not hippies. They're like
heretics.
No, not heretics. They're like the gypsies. Started with a G. I was totally wrong.
The Roma. Yeah.
Yeah. They'll like kill all the gypsies and the Jews and stuff because the gypsies and the Jews were the problem.
The Roma.
It's not like, they accredited that the utopia could never happen because the Jews and the gypsies and retarded people would always stop it from happening, like actively stop it. Sorry about
that. Okay. But you were saying? Yeah, no, they wanted to eradicate like disabled people. They wanted to eradicate anyone who was not a part of the Übermensch, right? I mean, not Übermensch, sorry, Überreich. Übermensch was Nietzsche. So they wanted to fucking eradicate everyone that was a part of the master race. Do you not see how that's different than like everyone in our society should be equal is a very different end goal than a lot of people in our society have to die. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I'm not saying that. That's not what I'm saying though.
Okay.
I'm saying that they accredited, right? Okay, so they wanted a utopia. They were like, okay, what's stopping us from having this utopia? Oh, it's these groups of people. Okay, well, let's just kill them so that we can have our utopia. So I'm not saying that.
No, that's not how it works. No, you cannot. No, you can't have a utopia with those people existing. That was the point, and that's why they killed them.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what do you not understand why that's like significantly different than saying like everyone should be equal? Every human.
Yeah. No, yeah.
It's actually in like direct. It's like antithetical to one another. Actually, it's like in direct opposition, which is probably why a lot of communists killed a fuckload of Nazis. But and Hitler also personally obviously hated communists and socialists as well. But my point is, I don't know how we even got to this. Like I don't know how we got here.
We were talking about like fascism, and I was trying to get you to guide me from like Hitler.
How does this? Yeah, how does
this lead to Holocaust denial?
Actually, kind of what we just talked about is a great fucking example of that. You know what I mean? Where like once you start questioning, like, well, what if they just wanted to have a utopia? Like, what if these people just left peacefully? You know what I mean? Well, then that would be technically a peaceful way of achieving that. You know, like that that sort of exclusionary policy being justified or being worked over in your head starts normalizing that. And that has a really damaging outcome.
Normalizing the idea that Hitler wanted equality? Because I never claimed that.
No, what? No. That's not. I think you're focusing on the chat. Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay. So when I was saying,
No, I said normalizing the idea that it starts the process of normalization. The normalization of the idea that killing people was a functional necessity, and that everyone wanted it. All the Germans wanted it. Maybe if the Jews just left, they would have been fine. You know what I mean? That sort of thing. That's what I'm saying. So that is really damaging because like fascists or any sort of like all these sorts of like really fucking nefarious ideologies have existed for a very long time. So they know they can't just come in and fucking blast through the door and be like, "What's up, bitch? This is the JQ. We're gonna fucking, the Holocaust didn't exist." If they came in like that, no one would fucking take them seriously. Everyone would be like, because we're all trained, at least anyone with fucking like a little bit of cursory knowledge of World War II is like, what the fuck? No, get out of here. You're a Nazi. So they have to make it like seem as though they are not Nazis, or they have to make it seem like you'll never hear an actual fascist tell you directly that they are a fascist until it's the right moment.
Yeah,
because
it's
the
like
ones
foot
that
in
we
the door.
know are real Nazis, no one takes seriously. Look at fucking Richard Spencer.
Whew, I don't even look at Richard Spencer.
That's what I'm saying, dude.
He's disgusting.
So when Jordan Peterson engages in this kind of rhetoric and he has a fucking platform that reaches millions of people, especially as a very brilliant clinical psychologist, especially as someone who is presenting himself as a person who only deals in objective facts, especially as someone who has said on numerous occasions that he has obsessively studied Nazi ideology, to grossly misrepresent something like this that mirrors a lot of fascist apologia is really shocking to me and makes me question it a little bit. Makes me a little suspicious.
Well, I'd be curious actually, because to watch some other, because he talks about it quite often. I would want to go over and watch other videos of him talking about it and see if that's the same line of reasoning that he draws every single time. Because this could like, it's one video, right? So we need like multiple examples in order for it to be like a confirmed thing, right?
Ethan Klein, like that's a brief snippet, but there are other parts in it where
I'll watch the whole interview before we talk again.
Yeah, as well as the revelation that he was very sensitive to disgust, according to Peterson. Hitler used Zyklon, an easy version of the gas used in the gas chambers at Auschwitz, to clean rats from German factories. And this, along with the economic instability in post-Versailles Germany, to Peterson's mind, is evidence that the Holocaust was a logical progression. So that is another. So that's the meat of the argument. The meat of the argument that we arrive at when you look at a lot of Jordan Peterson's videos on or even fucking classes on. Wait, what? What is Adrada? What the fuck? Oh, they're talking about something else. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Okay, that paired up with a bunch of other stuff that he said, as someone who, again, like I'm mentioning, I'm repeating myself a little bit here, but as someone who has openly admitted to knowing so much about Nazism.
Yeah,
it just strikes me very weird. If you've like covered what?
I think he's claimed once to like have literally read thousands of different like articles and books and whatnot surrounding World War II.
It's you don't think that's a little odd then that he's missing the main fucking point that like literally everyone knows? Is he onto a secret that we all don't know about that only I guess Nazis know? You know what I mean? And isn't that a little weird?
Yeah, in this clip it's a little weird, but I'd want to see him describe it and on not fucking Ethan Klein's
no, it's fine. He has a.
I'm sure it's somewhere else too. Like if this is like a belief that he's gonna say somewhere else.
Yeah, so the Holocaust, following a series of logical progressions, while kind of true, is essentially reverse engineering it. They're reverse engineering the final solution, and it's just it's rationalizing it. Do you see what I'm saying? Like that sort of functionalism is very weird. That sort of like functionalist argument is just you know, it's just really weird to like try to reverse engineer it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't think it's weird to reverse engineer it. I think it's weird to rationalize it, maybe. And I think there's a distinct difference between those two things, right? So if we reverse engineered like why the fucking final solution happened, right? We go back to the rise of Hitler, which goes back to World War One, which goes
especially when like the logical progression is odd. When you know that the ultimate goal is illogical, which is the mass eradication of people, which Hitler literally fucking mentioned before he did all of this stuff. You know what I mean? It's not like Hitler like stumbled across this and was like, oh God, well, I don't know. I guess I have to kill the Jews now. You know what I mean? It was literally like, no, I want to kill the fucking Jews. And then he told people
that was his outcry.
Fucking Jews, and then he killed the Jews. So any sort of information to try to counter that or to cast doubt on that is, of course, regarded by like anyone with fucking half a brain cell as like it's a Holocaust apologia or Holocaust denial, and you know, fascists are exclusively the ones who do it, and they do it so frequently that it's literally against the law in many European nations to do specifically that. Beyond hate speech restrictions, Holocaust apologia is literally illegal in a lot of European nations.
Oh, you muted yourself or something?
Wait,
You just cut out randomly.
Oh, I did? Well, I said, where did I cut out?
Oh, it was just a few seconds ago.
Oh, okay. I just said like it's so prevalent that it's such a useful and such a prevalent thing that fascists do that they literally have banned it. Like they have specifically codified it. They've written it into law.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I would.
But think about it. So this is why, by the way, this is why a lot of people advocate for, and this is for all the people in the chat. This is why a lot of people advocate to deplatform individuals, especially like Nazis and shit. Because look at the amount of, you're a reasonable person. Look at the amount of time I just spent talking about something that's fairly clear cut.
I mean, it's not fairly clear cut. If it was, then Jordan Peterson wouldn't be big, right? So, sorry, that's just like that's kind of an off topic observation.
I'm just saying, like, it's very difficult to fucking it's very difficult to counter people who are spreading misinformation in bad faith. So. Because, like, it's much easier to say the Holocaust didn't happen. It's much more difficult to say, here's why the Holocaust did happen. You're fucking crazy. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That's why. Yeah, here. Peterson literally claimed that Nazism was an atheist doctrine despite only 1.5% of Germans in 1939 claiming to lack of religious belief. I know. Yeah. Anyway, so that's like one, or yeah. But you get it, right? Like, do you understand why that sort of like functionalist approach is really scary?
Yeah.
And then what else? I mean, yeah, and it's also wrong. Like, it's incorrect. It's like not. So that's the part that I have the most issue with. Is that this person who is a brilliant psychologist coming out and who has talked about Nazi Germany a lot and talked about how much he studied it, coming out and saying, coming out and spreading real falsehoods about the main reason why the Holocaust happened is kind of weird. That's all I'm saying. And you'll probably hear a lot more of this. You'll probably hear a lot more people covering this shit in the future as well, because this is like, people are just now starting to realize this. Like I was looking into this like a couple months ago when Daniel made a video on it, and for those of you in the chat, I'm gonna link that right now, and we can even watch some pieces of it. I want to have him on the show again too. He's fucking awesome. I love him. Yeah. Here it is. Jordan
Hello
Peterson.
everyone. Today I want to expand on something I hinted at in a previous video of mine and address the lobster in the room, Dr. Jordan Peterson. Most people on YouTube probably know who he is by now, but in case you don't, I will give you a short overview. Jordan Peterson is a professor of psychology at the University of Toronto and rose to stardom not that long ago by misrepresenting the Act to amend the Canadian Human Rights Act and Criminal Code, also known as Bill C-16. For this, he was rewarded with
where was, oh yeah, so here, this is the actual video that is really good. Do you want to watch it? Oh shit, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm just listening.
Okay, all right. Are you having a hard time listening?
No. I can hear it if I'm quiet. So I'm just trying to stay quiet.
Okay.
with a lot of attention, and since then has been fetishized as some kind of free speech martyr for standing up to the Canadian government, who wanted to open the gulags to people accidentally misgendering a person.
If they find me, I won't pay it. If they put me in jail, I'll go on a hunger strike. I'm not doing this. That's that.
With his recent best
I mean, come on, that's such a fucking bitch-made thing to say, to be like, yeah, no, I'm going to be a bitch. I'm going to be very rude to people. I'm not doing it. And of course, a lot of people look at that and go, man, that's a principled guy right there. I don't know. I don't know what you think about that, but it's very strange to be like.
I think the way he says it, maybe he could be a little bit more tactful with it. But generally, like, I've actually seen him say two different things. One of which is saying that he's not going to call his students, or he's not going to call people who ask him to call them by their specific pronouns. He said he's not going to do that. And then another video, or multiple videos I've seen where he says he will. So
it's very difficult. It's very difficult to misgender. It's very difficult to misgender a lot of trans people, just so you know. When you think of a trans person, in your mind...
No, I'm talking about his policy on when his students ask him as a trans person to call them by a specific...
Well, it's illegal, so he will do it because he doesn't want to go to jail. That's why, and I'm so glad that it is, and I wish it was illegal in America too, because in a person in a position of power, and that's literally the reason why this law exists. A person in a position of power abusing a subordinate in this way, abusing someone who is underneath them in this way. What does that say about the fairness of the way he's going to read their is going to read their papers and shit? You know what I mean? Like, if you are showing that you have a serious bias and you're hiding that bias under, I'm not going to have my language compelled, then why the fuck would you ever, like, why would you ever fucking be nice to these people? Like, why would any trans person ever feel safe in your vicinity? And this should extend to other protected groups as well, just so you understand what I mean. Like, if he's like, I'm not going to be compelled to not say that the N-word to black people, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I'm making this distinction, I'm drawing this comparison, is because a lot of people unfortunately think that transphobia is totally acceptable. That's why people don't understand that it's not, and the Canadian government is literally saying it's not acceptable. So Jordan Peterson's like admirable stance against transphobia is actually just him saying, I just want to be fucking transphobic. And he's using the vehicle of speech to make it seem as though he's arguing about something else.
This is really hard. It's like,
which is, by the way, a very conservative tactic. You know, saying I don't want women to get abortions is fucking weird. You can't say that you're anti-abortion, so you say you're pro-life. You reframe the argument, and conservatives do that all the time.
I mean, this is really tough because we go from like
New York has a law that's similar, yes.
Yeah, they do. It's but they're different, but they're similar, yeah. We go from saying that that Jordan Peterson is like calling people by their preferred pronouns because he doesn't want to go to jail, and then you laugh maniacally, and then you're like, oh, and he's shit. What is it? It was the second one, but basically you're like, I don't know. I think you're taking all of these things to like they're very like extreme.
Well, isn't Jordan Peterson doing that when he says they're gonna put him in jail? But when when he does that, you're like, oh, it's fine.
No, I'm not saying it's fine. That's why I don't care about the C-16, the Bill C-16 stuff.
And also, no, I'm not taking it to the extreme level. What I simply was saying is that.
Well, I mean, you're like making an unfounded claim, which is like, oh, he's doing it just because he doesn't want to go to jail. He's never said that. He looks on the outside, at least, to be like a very like committed to his cause kind of person. I'm not saying that he should be committed to his cause. I'm just saying that that's what it looks like. But then you're like, oh, what a little bitch. And it like, I just I don't know how you get there from where without having this like very already
I said that Jordan went back on his claims that he's like he is not going to misgender his students. I was just responding to what you said. That was my funny speculation, I guess.
Okay.
But the things I said that followed that, I do believe. I think that championing this cause, when it's a law that literally, to my knowledge, maybe I'm incorrect, but it existed already, and the law is already. Well, here's what I do know 100%. Okay, so this is an addition. This is just an expansion of like adding another protected class.
Protected classes,
so
yeah.
So like this is literally, if Jordan Peterson was to be like, well, no, I'm not going to not say the N-word to a black student. Like if he said that, he'd be like, what the fuck? Shut the fuck up, dude. No, that's insane. But when he says I'm not going to do that to a trans person, because transphobia is currently so normalized and it's so deeply like it's so accepted that's why people are like, oh yeah, he just doesn't want fucking speech to be compelled. It's like speech is already being compelled. You just have an issue with this. I'm not saying you do specifically, by the way. I'm just saying Jordan Peterson has a specific issue with this sort of speech being compelled because he hasn't railed against other speech being compelled before. Feel me? So why? Why is it that he's only upset about this kind of speech being compelled?
There's a video where he specifically tackles this. I'll have to find the clip for it. It's I can link you the video. It's super long, and so I don't want to have to try and like find it. But they're talking specifically about Bill C-16, and they mention the fact that it is just laying on top of already existing protected classes. And he goes, "Fuck, I can't remember his exact wording, but it was."
I don't care about the nuance behind what he said.
Well, nuance is important, right? If we just like simplify every argument and then argue on the simplifications, you're missing so much. Let's not argue on the importance
of nuance. Right, give me the. I was just trying to make it easier for you to tell me the paraphrasing. Please go
on. Basically, he just draws the distinction between like the protected classes like black people versus making transgender people a protected class.
So he has an issue with making transgender people a protected class? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, he sees a distinction between the two. I don't remember what the distinction is exact, but he does draw a distinction between already protected classes and trans people. And I don't think it's because of transphobia. It very well might be. I don't know. Nobody's really... I think when people have asked him if he hates trans people, he said no. But
yeah, why would he say yes? He doesn't want to be named a bigot.
Well, I was basically just about to say that. Everyone would say, yes, I like trans people in public. They don't want to get crucified. But like, but yeah, I don't remember what that distinction was. And that's what I'd be interested in finding. And I'll probably link you a clip later if that's cool. But he does draw a distinction. And the distinction is not like, oh, because I hate them. Right?
Obviously, he's not going to say that. He's going to say stuff like, well, no, I love trans people. It's just that this is compelling speech, or the reason why trans people are different is because there isn't enough like medical research or whatever the fuck. I'm sure there's like a billion different things that he could say about it. I mean, I would love to find out what his like actual perspective is on why he thinks trans people are different than other protected classes when... You know, they're getting fucking murdered all around the country, especially in the United States, at least, with very little justice being served for the perpetrators. I mean, I'm sure there's some justice being served, but I guess I'm referring to the trans panic defense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Okay, so let's continue with the Nazi stuff. Let's go back to that. Because if you can find the video, I'd love to look at it and dissect it piece by piece.
Selling book 12 Rules for Life.
Oh, but yeah, by the way, just so you know, as far as the protected class, you can't say that like there has to be a denial there, right? Either you're denying that trans people aren't being oppressed or marginalized, unlike these other groups of minorities are, or these other groups of protected groups need to be protected because they are being marginalized, but trans people aren't. or you're saying that trans people don't exist. Like it has to be one or the other, or like trans people shouldn't exist because it's like a mental disability or something. It has to literally be one or the other, because otherwise, like, then you'd be like, yeah, no, they should be a protected class. Do you say what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
An antidote to chaos, he's also become the savior of disaffected young males with messy rooms. His main work, however, are his lectures, all of which can be found online and have now also gathered a significant fan base. There's one thing that stands out when talking about Jordan Peterson's fan base, and that sometimes earns him some uncomfortable questions.
Maximox says, thoughts on the Jews? Thoughts on the Jews? Well, the first thing I could say about Jews is that a lot of my friends happen to be Jewish, and okay, all right, what the hell? Address the Jewish question.
Cringy.
That's a hell of a thing to ask.
Could Jewish individuals...
Listen, I'm not afraid to point out when I don't agree with it. And like I said, most of what I've delved into is like, it's like,
address the Jewish question. Oh, well, what the hell? Like, come on,
like,
dog.
No,
Okay, what the hell?
I'll be
Address
fair.
the
Like,
Jewish question.
if something's that I don't agree with, I'll point it out.
Okay. Well, you're not even doing the meme where it's like, well, it's their followers. You could have racist Nazis in your fucking group of followers. Like, it's not like he always talks against the Nazis. Like, you're not even doing that. So respect, hats, thank you for not doing that fucking classic meme that every alt-right, I'm not saying you are obviously, but every alt-right dipshit on the internet that you engage with normally is like, well, you could have whatever you want in your fan base. Like, like, you know what I mean? As if you're not fucking cultivating the people who follow you. But yeah. I don't think I've ever seen Assad's followers asking for thoughts on the Jews. Yeah, literally. And we talk about Palestine quite frequently. Because there's a difference between anti-Semitism and criticizing Israel. Okay, let's keep going.
That's a hell of a thing to ask.
Could Jewish individuals use their position of power to seek out revenge against places like Europe and Russia that have a history of expelling Jews?
Hold it.
Namely that he seems to attract
That dude was so angry, dude.
a lot of people from the fringes of the right, although he's very opposed to the political views of said fringes. His, let's say, more moderate fanbase seems to have no answer for why that is, and often claims that if anything, Peterson has a moderating effect on people with extremist views, pulling them more to the center. There is a very popular clip making the rounds, which has gathered around 2.3 million views by now, and is titled How Hitler Was Even More Evil Than You Think. Although I would assume Peterson would probably object to this title because his big thing is that given the right circumstances, anyone can be a Nazi prison guard. A very revolutionary idea, by the way, that people are shaped by their surroundings. Anyway, the clip is taken from...
By the way, wait, so those are two big clips that we can go through, and Daniel's going to go through one of them. But this idea, where is it? How anyone can be a Nazi. I think he doesn't stand on top of that enough. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because that idea was not compelling enough for the Nuremberg trials. Do you know what I mean? Like
by now, and is titled How Hitler Was Even
our understanding of a lot of things is very different than they were during the Nuremberg.
Peterson would probably object to this title because his big thing is that given the right circumstances, anyone can be a Nazi prison guard.
Yeah, like I was saying, Jordan Peterson, if you were a Nazi in Germany, you would be a Nazi. That's a funny thing.
No, I think that like his overall like arcing argument is that anyone can be made to do bad things depending on the situation and social influences and a number of other things. Like in one of the books that he references is Man's Search for Meaning, which was written by a psychologist who was in Auschwitz.
I have it right here.
Oh, cool! I have it too.
This is what my ex-girlfriend gave this to me. Viktor E. Frankl.
Yep. You have a different version than me, but it's probably the same translation. But basically, like, well, fuck. Now I've lost my train of thought. Even he says that like in the book somewhere that some of the guards were much worse than other guards. Some of them were way more vindictive, and so those guards were generally placed on like the straight up killing squads that they had. And so like even if Jordan Peterson can prove to
not all Nazis were as bad as the worst Nazis, but they were still bad.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that they weren't still bad. Just some had like more psychopathic tendencies than others, which everyone does. but so all Jordan Peterson would have to do to substantiate his claim is to prove that like the average person could be as bad as the best Nazi, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think that idea that that anyone can be as bad as a Nazi, given like a specific situation, is like a crazy one.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that that still plays a part in the that still plays a part in the apologia, is my point. Because in the end of the day, the goodest of the Nazis are still Nazis, unless they're like actively trying to fucking, because it's not like they didn't understand what they were doing is insanely fucking cruel and inhumane. And in that point, even the best Nazi, unless they're like actively killing all the other Nazis and making sure that those Jews can escape, they're fucking Nazis and they're bad. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't think this is that crazy of a perspective.
But it's like a Nazi apologizing because like we can show that you can do the same things that Nazis did, given the right circumstances. Like the Nazis did experiments on this exact thing.
Well, I mean, Zadroga, right? That's what you're. I mean, this is not a Nazi experiment, but like the prisoner, is it Zadroga? Yeah. The Zadroga prisoner experiment is like literally how cruelty formulates in an environment where like one group of people have power over the other, or absolute power over the other. But that doesn't.
Because not only did like Nazis have absolute power, they like really believed it. They were like, shit, we're the master race.
Prison experiment. Sorry. The Stanford prison experiment, which has, by the way, been completely discredited. Thank you, Willie Trom. It's a really interesting experiment, but it is completely discredited. It was discredited exclusively for, well, first of all, hold on. People are like fucking flexing and telling me it's the Stanford one, but I think the guy's name was fucking literally Zadroga. Am I wrong? No.
Yeah, if it's been discredited, I'd like to see that. Granted, I did hear about this like probably high school. Like it was a long time ago.
Well, it's not Zadroga. God damn it, I was wrong. Fuck me. What the fuck? Zhivago? What the fuck was the guy's name?
Just look up Stanford prisoner experiment.
I know.
You'll find it.
All right. God damn it. Zimbardo. Zhivago. Whatever. Zimbardo, Zadroga. Fuck you guys. Zimbabwe. It's fucking difficult, all right? Whatever. Yeah, it was Stanford prison experiment led by Khal Drogo. Okay. But yeah, it was discredited mostly because it was incredibly unethical and, Okay.
Well,
whatever.
is it just because it was unethical? Sorry, I think this is kind of important to my point.
Yes, the data that they arrived at was not usable because it was, because it was.
Oh, it was done in like a fucked up way.
Well, yes, it was done in a very fucked up way. But
yeah.
anyways.
Okay. Well, I'd have to. Okay. So what I'm doing right now is I talked about this earlier. Is that the deeper we go, the less in depth I'm going to be able to be about any of these things.
It's fine.
So I'm just writing these down so I can do research later.
Okay. Anyway, don't even fucking don't even focus too much on the. If you were a Nazi in Nazi Germany, you would be a Nazi idea.
Well, this is something that you claim is like Nazi apology, and so I'm like.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't know exactly what his perspective on the video. I don't know exactly what his perspective is on this specific video. So I don't want to say like maybe he fucking talks about how it's not actually that way. You know what I mean? I don't want to like base it off of. I don't want to base it off of exclusively what what the fucking. Wait, hold on. I have to lower your voice a little bit, I guess.
Oh, am I loud as hell?
No, it's because I have to increase the voice of the. I have to increase the voice of. Wait, speak again.
Speaking.
All right, this is fine.
A very revolutionary idea, by the way, that people are shaped by their surroundings. Anyway, the clip is taken from a longer lecture called Maps of Meaning 11, The Flood and the Tower, which I will leave in the description so you can make sure I'm not taking him out of context. In this lecture, he tackles the Nazis' motivation for the Holocaust and gives his own perspective on the matter. It is unfortunate that as with so many things he says, his own lack of knowledge leads to his points being garbled at best and wrong at worst. Not only is he completely wrong historically speaking and puts into question if his knowledge of Nazi ideology exceeds Hitler's table talk and ordinary men, but the way he frames Hitler's or the Nazis' motivations showcases why the far right finds him so appealing. He doesn't make any excuses or portrays them positively in any way, but what his take and his other work implies fits very well with what the far right thinks. So we'll look at how he's wrong from a historical perspective and why his conclusion is actually dangerous. Let's listen to the clip, shall we?
So here's what you should have done if you were a Nazi and you wanted to win the war. You should have enslaved the Jews and the Gypsies and had them work, right? You should have had them work for the benefit of the victory, and then if you wanted to, you liquidate them afterwards. That's the logical thing to do if you want to win. And we assume that Hitler wanted to win. But that's not a very intelligent assumption. Why would you assume that? He wasn't exactly a good guy. So why should we assume that he was aiming at the good that he was promoting, even in his own terms, right? The glorious, everlasting Third Reich. So what do you do with the Jews and the Gypsies? Well, round them up, fine. Enslave them, fine. You don't kill them. You certainly don't devote a substantial proportion of your war resources while you're losing to accelerate the rate at which the extermination is taking place. Because that's a bit...
Do you know what this is? Do you know what he's doing right now? And by the way, I'm very well aware of when someone is doing Holocaust denial because I'm fucking Turkish, dog. Okay?
Yeah.
This is Holocaust denial. You don't go out and downright fucking say
he's changing
Holocaust didn't
the
happen.
motives of Hitler.
Not only is he changing the motives of Hitler, which is very important, but he's also saying, like, he's dog whistling to say, like, well, you wouldn't have exterminated them, would you? I mean, why would you exterminate them? You should just use them in your camps. Maybe he wasn't exterminating them is not the point that he makes, because, you know, that would be not a dog whistle anymore. It would be a fucking foghorn. But that's not how Jordan Peterson operates anyway. Remember how we established in the beginning that Jordan Peterson likes to make normative claims and then ties that normative claim or usually will reframe specific things that are pseudoscientific or revisionist or just like reframes the argument in his way?
Bit counterproductive, unless what you're aiming at is the maximum possible mayhem in the shortest period of time.
There's a whole lot to unpack just within this short statement. There is the fact that Peterson doesn't seem really sure if it's the Nazis' Third or the imagined by neo-Nazis Fourth Reich he's talking about. There is the issue that calling the Roma, Sinti, and others persecuted under the label Gypsies, a term which reproduces questionable language used by the perpetrators of the Holocaust. But the foremost problem is that Peterson doesn't seem to take his own advice seriously.
Now, you know, you have to use that dictum carefully.
Later in the video, he cites Jung, of course, to make the point that sometimes in order to infer the motivations for an action, one needs to look at the outcome of an action.
You can suspend your unnecessary demolition of people, win the damn war, and then pick it up afterwards. Or while you're losing, you can just accelerate the mayhem, even though it's counterproductive. It's like, what'd they pick? Well, they picked to accelerate the mayhem. And so to me, there's an old psychoanalytic idea. I think this was derived by Jung. If you can't figure out what someone is doing or why, look at the outcome and infer the motivation.
That's not really what historians investigating the Nazis and the Third Reich, or any period for that matter, do. Not just because not every action might produce the outcome desired by the historical actor, but also because, and this is something where Peterson should probably have listened to some postmodern theorists if he had read them, presents the massive danger of projecting your own cultural and social assumptions and rationalities back onto historical actors who, due to difference in historically formed discourse, might operate under entirely different assumptions and rationalities. Case in point, Jordan Peterson asserts that in order to win the war, it would have been more beneficial to round up and enslave Jews and so-called gypsies rather than to kill them. This represents a fairly abhorrent application of capitalist logic of valorization and exploitation. Under the base assumptions our society and the society Jordan Peterson operates under, the mass enslavement and economic exploitation of millions of people represents an understandable, a logical policy. Leaving aside for now that the Nazis did exactly that in addition to mass murder, the problem begins when Peterson juxtaposes this supposedly fine logic with what he asserts the Nazis' real motif for their actions was: mayhem, and getting into the metaphysical Jungian drivel, the mark of Cain.
Or are we going to attribute to Hitler the highest possible motives? Say, no, it's an archetypal manifestation of Cain. Now, he's going to put up a front that says, well, I'm your savior. It's like, well, destructive people think that Cain is their savior.
The reality is simpler yet more complicated at the same time. Rather than mayhem or any sort of metaphysical manifestation of evil, the Nazis are relatively straightforward in telling us their base assumptions upon which their actions and logic is based upon. It's not...
that's the point I was making earlier, where it's like, dude, the Nazis they didn't tiptoe around the issue. You know what I mean? They very openly mentioned what they wanted to do, right? Including Hitler. So why is Jordan Peterson trying to reconfigure or reverse engineer even something that is already established by the Nazis themselves? Very weird.
Listen, I completely agree on everything that as far as like Nazi Germany goes. Like I'm pretty well read on history, not amazingly, but so I understand the real history of it, and seeing multiple examples of Jordan Peterson doing this kind of history revisionist stuff, this like Holocaust denial / Nazi apologist, these Nazi apologist things. It's like
I'm not saying
Yeah,
Jordan
dude, you're-
Peterson's a Nazi, dude. I'm not saying that.
No, you're right, but it does
But
draw.
it is
You're
really
right. It does
weird.
draw some like.
It is
some
really
question marks.
weird how much he fucking hates communists and how much he fucking hates the far left, and how even in a time right now when we have we are in the throes of a proto-fascist potential transitional authoritarian these are things that you'll learn in your political science major as well, potential transition to authoritarianism, with literal fascists rising all around the world. To focus exclusively on how far left can the left go, you guys. This is threatening to our future. To focus exclusively on the communists, the radical Marxists, the postmodernists, which he demonstrably does not understand that either, is rather strange to me. Why, on the one hand, engage in near, damn near borderline Nazi apologia, while on the other hand attack Marxists and all of those other people who have literally no fucking power whatsoever, right? Like, do you think the college students on college campuses, do you think the gender studies professors have a tremendous amount of power, as Jordan suggests, that we are like rewriting science and history and whatnot now? And then, by the way, but the reason why I'm hyper focusing on this is because like this is like his entire, like, this is the biggest conquest that we must achieve in order to fix Western society. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because that, when you tie it back, the eradication of Western civilizations back to the leftist principles, back to cultural Marxism, that's what fascists say. That's literally what fascists say. The Frankfurt School. The fact that a bunch of Jews got together and decided on the principles of diversity and multiculturalism in an effort to unleash havoc upon Western civilized nations, just as an effort to keep them divided so that they can maintain power and control all of these nations. This is what fascists believe. Really weird that Jordan Peterson also engages in that side of the things as well, when he's like the vilification, the overwhelming vilification of people on the left. Do you want me to continue, or you got any perspectives on this?
I think the perspective I have right now is this is not the conversation I expected to be having. Generally, just because, like I said, I focus mostly on like the self-help, and a lot of it's specific like psychological work. Generally, I ignore like the C16 stuff or the political stuff, or but bring it to my attention like the Nazi rhetoric he's spreading, and or maybe some of the views that he might have, as well as there's just a lot of stuff that maybe I don't feel comfortable having this conversation right. And I don't want to like sit here and try and play devil's advocate for something that I don't fully understand, because I think it's a waste of both of our time. So maybe in the future I'll hit you up again, and I'll still defend certain aspects of him, but there are certain things now that you've shown that I don't think that because he said a few things that are like slightly apologist or not slightly, but like probably apologist rhetoric. That doesn't mean that like everything he's ever said is completely wrong.
No, not at all. I that's not what I was saying at all.
Sorry,
Anyway.
I saw your shit in chat and I was like,
No, I don't think you're. I don't think you're saying that, and I don't think you're defending him anymore when it comes to this sort of stuff at all. I mean, you might.
Yeah, because it looks. I mean, right now it looks pretty cut and paste, but like I haven't looked into it on my end. I haven't been looking out. This is kind of like the first that I've been involved with this idea that he does some Holocaust denial stuff.
Do you watch?
I would have to look into.
Do you watch what kind of YouTube channels do you like? You watch Destiny and stuff? Like I can recommend some really good YouTube channels for you to look at. So obviously 3 Arrows is one that's really good. Sean and Jen, H Bomber guy, those guys are fucking awesome. ContraPoints is really good. I'm gonna go ahead and assume that if you like Jordan Peterson this much, you're probably not a leftist. Like you're
No, I'm
not...
super left. I'm crazy left.
Wait, really? Would
Yeah.
you say you're a Marxist?
Okay, maybe not that crazy left.
Okay,
I'm like moderate left.
Oh, no, buddy, there's a lot more to the left that I hope you come back onto this stream and explore. No, you're not even, dude. You're you're a liberal, dog.
No, okay, so I guess I haven't really even talked about like what I even like about Jordan Peterson, which is I kind of ran over. It was like mostly the self-help stuff, which is like, okay, well, you brought up the get your house in order before you criticize someone else's, which is basically like the same shit that they tell you on an airplane, which is like put your own face mask on before you put somebody else's on. You got to get your shit together before you can start telling other people to get their shit together. And there's like a lot of these like basic like philosophical rules that he like very neatly and I think very eloquently put together in the form of a book. And so I generally, that is what I like about him. When it comes to the politics stuff, I'll watch it for the memes. Like if Destiny brings up some shit about him, I'll watch that. Or the Channel 4 news stuff. I think everyone who cares about politics and has heard Jordan Peterson has probably seen that shit. But
yeah, no,
like,
that was terrible. That was a terrible interview. I think Kathy Newman's fine, like normally, but I don't think she was well equipped enough to tackle someone like Jordan Peterson. And by the way, he's a very formidable he's a very formidable debate opponent. People can easily criticize everyone else's work and say, "Oh, whatever, I would have done it so much better. I would have dealt with him so well." It's like, no, dude, he's very good. He's a very
Destiny says that shit. It makes me mad.
Yeah, no, Destiny says that shit. Yeah, I know. I mean, I do too. I say that shit when I watch Destiny's debates. I'm like, oh, I would have fucking wrecked him there. You know, it's not that easy.
Hindsight's 20/20, right?
But look, the thing is, the reason why Jordan Peterson is so damaging, once you start seeing this side of things a little bit differently, once your perspective is changed a little bit when it comes to this sort of shit, you'll start noticing like, wait a fucking second. Well, he lies a little bit, like, or at least he reframes the truth a little bit, and he's doing this, and he's a fucking Amazon bestseller author, like not New York Times, Amazon. You know what I mean? Like literally one of the most sold books on the fucking planet. He has a Patreon with like thousands of fucking subscribers. Like all of these young men are probably unaware of what they're watching and like probably being inadvertently red-pilled, or at least getting to a position where they're more open-minded to becoming red-pilled, or at least keeping or at least like developing a hostility to ideas on the left because of the active misinformation that a person like this is spreading. And it's not, Petrol Bomb said it too, it's not just young men, it's adults as well. I've watched videos of fucking fully grown, fully developed adult men crying in tears as they write like an open letter to Jordan Peterson about how he saved their life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, like, okay, so I think maybe this is why I like Jordan Peterson so much, is because like I was kind of in that situation myself. I just got out of a relationship. She left me a month before our son was born, and then it's been like a constant headache ever since. And then like I think maybe a month after she took off, right around when my kid was born, I started like 12 Rules for Life came out, and I started reading it, and like that shit really helps. But that wasn't like, I don't know. I think I clung more to like basic like personal principles that you should have for yourself rather than like the political stuff, because I don't think that 12 Rules for Life is a very political book.
No,
I don't know. Would you disagree?
Yeah, but no. I mean, I told you already. Like there are certainly elements in which he like channels his personal political philosophy through like very. Because here's a guy who's a very skilled orator, but he's also very good at symbolism. If there's one thing that Jordan Peterson loves to fucking analyze, what is it? What does he fucking call it? God damn it! It's like the meta-analysis. No, someone help me out, please. I can't.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about though, because he takes like Sleeping Beauty for example,
yeah, dude,
and like
this is
the
literally what he
pinprick
does.
is like losing her virginity.
Yeah, the archetypes. Thank you, archetypes. So like he has spent an entire fucking life I can agree with that statement. 12 Rules for Life is not that political. Yes, 12 Rules for Life is not that political on its face, but it's a really good introduction
Foot
to
in the
Jordan
door.
Peterson. And by the way, the reason why people so fucking fervently support him is because he has helped them out with these very simple tools, right? And like, you know what I mean? It's understandable. Yeah. It's understandable that you feel this like appreciation for him if his work actually helped you in some way, even if it's just like self-help. I don't want to say self-help garbage, but I just personally hate fucking all self-help shit. Like, I think it's bullshit. You know what I mean? I don't know, but
no, I think you have to separate the bad stuff from the good stuff when it comes to self-help. Generally, yeah, I would be in agreement with you.
Yeah, but the point I was making is like he kind of opens the door to like all the other he kind of opens the door to you kind of developing this relationship with him, and then what he feeds you, what he fills your head with afterwards is really bad stuff. Especially if, and you said you're at least like really far to the left, especially if you acknowledge that capitalism is on a path to fucking destroy the planet and itself, and probably going to be more and more violent as in our lifetimes. You know what I mean?
Okay, wait. So I come in and I tell you that I'm a fan of Jordan Peterson and Destiny, and then you're trying to get me off of capitalism. You realize that these two people are like the biggest capitalists ever.
Yeah, I don't believe in Destiny's capitalism. We'll get to Destiny. We'll get to Destiny's capitalism at a later date. But yeah, no. My point is that, like I said, that we can have a completely separate conversation about that if you want. But that's too long for me to fucking get into. Holy shit! I wasn't even gonna talk to you, and I was gonna fucking raid Will instead. And look at me, I'm like, I've had like a 2-hour conversation. What the fuck? Oh my god, I can't stop myself. Okay. So what I was going to say is a lot of people, at the very least, and if you say that you're like on the left, you acknowledge that there are flaws in capitalism, no? Would you not say that? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, well, Jordan Peterson does not. Jordan Peterson's entire, oh, hell yes, dude. Oh, fucking 3 Arrows is here. Wait, hold on. I'm going to bring him in here.
Okay.
No.
Oh, this is the dude who runs the YouTube channel, right? That you were telling me to go.
Wait, hold on. I'm gonna fucking invite him to server right now. Oh, this is so perfect, dude. Holy shit.
And he's making fun of I'm super left. When I say I'm super left, like
no, we're making fun of you because no, everyone here is socialist. That's why we're making fun of you. Because and I don't think they should, because I always say like liberals and social democrats, or at least like people who like fight for fucking or advocate for like socialized medicine in this country and shit, like those people they're probably socialist. They just don't realize it yet, or they haven't like engaged with theory too much. Don't make fun of them and then gatekeep like dicks, okay? Especially tankies. You fucking chill, all of you tankies. Anyway, lol, I'm neither of those. But yeah, so a socialist is Venezuela. So you're not socialist then. Anyway, all right. Well, I just invited him. He'll be up. He'll be in the chat in a second. Oh fuck, where is this?
Yeah, I'm ready to get gangbanged. Okay, let's give.
Oh my god, no, dude, it's not like that. No, Daniel is literally the nicest human being of all time. He's so fucking awesome. He's been on.
Yeah, I'm not aware of him or his content at all.
No, there's a lot. Listen, young one, there's a lot more that we can show you. Don't worry. Look, the content, like the fucking cringe compilations and shit, are gonna get boring after a while. You know what I mean? Trust me. There's a lot more.
Oh, I know.
There's a lot more out there on the internet. Especially the people on the left are so fucking goddamn creative that I'm surprised that these videos have not. I'm surprised that these people have not like blown the fuck up already.
Well, the right is. I don't know. It's
the
like
right is flooding the fucking marketplace with like all this bullshit content, so it's very hard to like kind of sift through that to get to like the leftist perspective. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, so the point I was making though with Jordan Peterson is that like um the point I was making with Jordan Peterson is that he's taking these people, he's engaging with them, he's developing a personal relationship with people in their moment of weakness, even like you described about yourself, and and he's kind of capitalizing on that by leading them down to get become Patreon members or consume his content and engage with it. But all the while he's doing that, he's literally fucking filling your head with nonsense. The other person in the chat who was also a Jordan Peterson fan, Vinny Moo, who I'm sure missed a big chunk of this conversation, just said Crowder is daddy. And then and that shows me that like you watch Jordan Peterson and then you start engaging with all the other people that Jordan Peterson engages with. Very
Well,
interesting.
luckily,
Very interesting people.
I ran into Destiny before I ran into Jordan Peterson, so I was already exposed to those people in a very negative light. So
Okay,
I'm not worried about like watching Jordan Peterson and then suddenly I'm a Ben Shapiro fan.
No. But like it doesn't. First of all, it doesn't happen overnight, and secondly, first of all, it doesn't happen overnight, and secondly, like it's just, it's I don't know. It's not. It doesn't work for everybody. Like you also have to have conservative opinions on certain things. You know what I mean? You can't like just immediately change your mind overnight.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's a lot of like introspection, yeah. Generally not like very well guided introspection to lead you to the right.
No, Ragbang, I know Jordan Peterson fans come in more of a spectrum than I think. That's literally what I mean, first of all, you're a walking representative.
That was the whole point of his argument.
Yeah, no, that's literally what I'm saying. That's why he's so fucking dangerous. Anyway, let's keep watching the Daniel video, and then when he comes in, we can have a conversation with him as well.
Okay.
But, here. Wait, why isn't it working?
Mayhem, but rather the idea that the prime objective is the removal, up to and including physical extermination of Jews and so-called gypsies from the world. Winning the war for the Nazi leadership and the German state at the time means achieving that goal. War, German military theorist Karl von Clausewitz wrote, is the extension of politics by other means. This dictum is as true for the Nazis as it is for virtually every other war of the 19th and 20th century. Nazi politics and ideology is built around one core assumption about the nature of society, the state and history. That all of history, including all social formations, are built around a biological conflict between races, with the most prominent actors on the stage being the German or Aryan race, which represents order, progress and civilization, and the alleged Jewish race, which represents chaos, decadence, decay, and destruction. Since in the Nazi worldview all of history revolves around this conflict, so does necessarily the Second World War and the conception of what a German victory looks like in this conflict. Even with the war itself becoming an important catalyst in radicalizing German policy, from discrimination, forced immigration, and ghettoization to actual physical extermination of Jews. In his book The Origins of the Final Solution, Christopher Browning writes about the important changes that came with the start of the war in 1939 that not only forced the Nazis to consider what they called the Jewish question in a framework beyond Germany, it also represented a qualitative change. Germany was now at war. For some time, Nazi propaganda had branded the Jew as the enemy of Germany. If war came, it would be through the machinations of international Jewry. The Jew was an integral part, indeed the quintessence of the Nazi Feindbild, or stereotyped image of the enemy. Now that Germany was at war, harsh measures against the enemy, including potential enemies, non-combatant civilians, women, children, seemed self-evident and justified by national interest. We don't even have to look far to get this information straight from the horse's mouth. In a speech from January 13th, 1949, so more than half a year before the invasion of Poland, Hitler stated the following: "Today I will once more be a prophet. If the international Jewish financiers in and outside Europe should succeed in plunging the nations once more into a world war, then the result will not be the Bolshevization of the earth and thus the victory of Jewry, but the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe." Hitler would echo this prophecy several times in public, and after the US entered the conflict, propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels wrote in his diary, "Regarding the Jewish question, the Führer is determined to clean the table." He prophesied that should the Jews once again bring about a world war, they would be annihilated. These were no empty words. The world war has come, therefore the annihilation of the Jews has to be its inevitable consequence. The question has to be examined without any sentimentality. We are not here to pity Jews, but to have pity for our own German people. If the German people have sacrificed about 160,000 dead in the battles in the East, the instigators of this bloody conflict will have to pay for it with their lives. But the war did even more than that. Since in the view of Hitler and the German leadership, it represented the Manichaean struggle between the German and the Jewish race, it both necessitated every conceivable measure and made more radical policy possible. It is no coincidence that the order by which the T4 killing program aimed at murdering handicapped and mentally ill individuals in German hospitals and asylums was backdated by Hitler.
Oh, he's in the Discord? Okay. Oh, thank you for letting me know. Alright, where are we at? Wait, how the fuck do I get to my own Discord? I always fuck this up. Wait, get in the general.
I don't.
Daniel. Someone tell him to get in the general so I can, general voice channel so I can pull him in. Hold on. Wait, what were you gonna say? You wanted to say something?
Oh no, I was just saying I didn't see him in general voice chat. By the way, he's in there now. You can drag him.
Oh, okay, good. What's up, dude?
You wanted to say something? Oh no, I was just saying I didn't.
Amateur hour, Daniel. You're like you're fucking. You still have the stream on, dude. Hello.
I think you might be muted.
He's not muted, but we can't hear him right now for some reason. I don't know why. Oh, nope. I think I saw it. He's making.
Hello?
Yo,
There
what's
he is.
up? What's up, dude?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, I am. I'm having an in-depth conversation with a Jordan Peterson fan who is a liberal, and I think
Okay.
your video and the 2-hour conversation that I had before it as well is somewhat opened his eyes potentially to the light fascist agitprop that Jordan Peterson engages in, or at least the dangerous way he refers to certain like the dangerous historical revisionism that Jordan Peterson engages in, even though he is a self-declared Nazi expert. Basically, he's like spent his entire life looking at Nazi stuff, and yet somehow like really basic things that Hitler fucking literally mentioned escape him. I don't know how, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would say that's probably true. Like when Jordan Peterson says he studied Nazism for 40 years, I'm not sure I can't believe that.
Wait, so you think he's
by the-
lying about whether he studied Nazism for 40 years, or do you
Oh,
think it's more nefarious?
No, I think he probably believes that he studied Nazism for 40 years. And I can explain why I think that's nonsense. But first off, like, who am I talking to right now? It's you, Hasan, and who's the other person in chat?
Oh, my name is, my IRL name is Kobe. I'm just like you said,
Okay.
a Jordan Peterson fanboy.
Okay, hey Kobe. Yeah, no problem. So
No, but he's very understanding. He wasn't like he normally like when I talk to Jordan Peterson fans, like they're crazy. Like they'll go to any length to defend Jordan Peterson, but he was like very understanding from the jump.
Well, I mean, you were like, okay, look at this. This is Nazi apologism, and I was like, okay, that's one account on the H3H3. So, and then you gave me there was I think one or two more. Like after that, it's kind of like staring it right in the face. Like there's not a lot I can say because first of all, I don't know much about that stance that he took specifically. So
okay.
but yeah, no, I'm open to the idea of like me being wrong for.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah,
and
I
Daniel,
don't
I
know,
started
like,
off with I started off by explaining him like what fascists do, first and foremost, like what crypto fascists, like the tactics that they engage in, this is not associating themselves with Hitler. You know what I mean? Like never openly like admitting that they're Nazis until like the right moment. You know what I mean? And then also one of the best ways to spot a fascist or a Nazi usually is like Holocaust denial. And then I told him why, like, basically what Jordan Peterson says and how it kind of mirrors Holocaust revisionism or like Holocaust denial in some respects. He doesn't outright deny it, I don't think, right? He's never like been like.
No, of course not. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know what like is in Jordan Peterson's head, but I don't think he has like a nefarious agenda when it comes to the Holocaust.
Oh, you don't think?
I just
Okay.
think he just doesn't know as much as you think he knows. And I'm gonna give you like a really like short example of why I think like when he says he studied Nazism for 40 years, that's bullshit, and that is kind of indicative on how he approaches like other topics like philosophy and postmodernism. So
That's true,
this
yeah.
lecture that this clip is from, it's called "The Flood in the Tower." If you want to look it up. And right before he goes into this little tangent of how Nazi society was organized and how they saw the war, he says, this is based on a book that came out in the 80s or so that's called Hitler's Willing Executioners. Have you heard of that book before?
No, I've not heard of that specific book.
Oh, you're talking
Okay,
about the Nazis becoming prison guards, right? Or if you're a Nazi in a prison, is that what you're talking about?
That's a separate thing. So this book Hitler's Willing Executioners came out in the mid-90s, and it's by Daniel Goldhagen, and it was very popular among like the average Joes in average bookstores. But it was completely ripped to shreds by historians because it kind of tried to make the point that like the anti-Semitism in Germany was like prone to extermination, that this had to happen. And several historians looked over that book and the evidence he collected and said, yeah, this is pretty much all bullshit. It's very ahistorical, to the point where he even like had accusations for racist Germanophobia. And this book is like completely disregarded in genocidal studies or Holocaust from Holocaust scholars. And then if you say you studied Nazism for 40 years and you base your lecture or part of your lecture on this book, that seems very contradictory to me.
Huh, interesting. I didn't even think about it that way. So you think, but like from where I'm standing, it almost seems like he has only looked at, I guess he's only looked at or studied things that correspond to his perspective, maybe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
If it
seems
was more
very
nefarious,
incoherent.
if it was more nefarious than that.
I mean, it seems very incoherent to me. Like on the one hand, he like uses this book to teach his students. On the other hand, like in the H3 interview, he says, you know, Ordinary Men is a good book, which is like the exact counterpoint to this book. But I don't know. Like, I think he just like should be quiet when it comes to the Holocaust.
Wait, oh, by the way, what do you think about the H3 one? Because that was what sparked this entire conversation. I like showed it to him, and I was like, that seems to me like shifting the blame away from Hitler a little bit, and even though it is historically accurate, like what he's saying as far as like anti-Semitism and whatnot, but it does seem to me like what he's doing there. He literally at some point in the H3 interview says, well, you know, Hitler looked at the crowd and it almost guided him unconsciously, like as though Hitler did not have this personal opinion that he wanted to fucking...
good Jordan Peterson.
Thank you. I've heard that so many times and it still fucking feels great whenever people say it. But yeah.
You add like just enough Kermit the Frog into Jordan Peterson that it's good.
But
yeah, this like playing off the crowd, I think that's taken actually from Hitler's Willing Executioners, which is a debunked book. But I tuned into your stream very late. I'm not sure which exact clip from H3 you watched.
Well, I watched the one where he like first says he's like Hitler's a war hero, and you know you and like the situation in Germany is bad after you have recession, after World War I. Everyone's angry. There's a lot of chaos, and we need order. So you know what I mean, like that sort of shit where he like, you know, he's like, we need order, and then someone comes in and gives this like mystical fantasy order that will be restored, and then there's a perfect villain for it, and blah blah blah. And then he made it seem as though when he was talking about it, he made it seem as though Hitler was being guided unconsciously by the responses that he was getting to saying certain things, like the Jews are bad. Though that was one of the things. Obviously, like, he didn't explicitly say that, but as though like it was the rampant anti-Semitism of the German people that guided Hitler, and not necessarily anti-Semitism existed, and Hitler already had that anti-Semitism and like definitely increased it to you know, the Nazi level.
Yeah, and that's exactly true. That's exactly the point that this debunked book is trying to make, that this anti-Semitism was like specific to the German people. And someone sent me like a link to where he's on Joe Rogan with Brett Weinstein, and he says
he said the same shit. Yeah,
but and also he says like you know, there are just things you can't say about Hitler. You can't say, you know, Hitler did wonders for the German economy, which is like,
what the fuck? Why are these people doing this, dude? What are you even
talking about?
Yeah, I didn't really want to get into that because I didn't want to get into that because like fucking I don't think you, Cody, you don't like the fucking Brett Weinstein too, right? That's like that's a different kind of person. So
yeah, that's a different wheelhouse.
Yeah. That's like but like members of the intellectual dark web are just saying very suspicious things about like borderline Holocaust denial. That's why I'm reluctant to say they are denying the Holocaust, because they're not, but they are saying like a lot of things that members of the alt-right, or at least like Nazis fucking say when they start denying the Holocaust, or at least when they start the you know, when they start the conversation about like why this was actually functionalist.
Yeah, I mean, Cody, for you, I really don't want to like gang up on you.
No,
Like,
I'm ready for it. Let's go.
Okay, like just for what would turn me up listening to what would turn me off listening to this person, getting a lot of my views from him or advice, would be that if with this example of the Holocaust and World War II, someone being so confident in what he says and being so blatantly wrong in a lot of cases, it would make me suspicious.
Dude, that's literally what I said in the beginning too, where I was like, he makes these like very confident statements that are flat out false, that where he heavily relies on your personal biases or your lack of knowledge in the field, and this is consistent for all members of the intellectual dark web across the board. I did one on Ben Shapiro earlier today about how he like his historical revisionism, which is kind of funny because he participated in this in an identical fashion when it in regards to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. He literally said the Jim Crow laws were the reason why people were being racist in the South. It was big government overreach. I was like, what the fuck? Like I don't know why they do this shit, but it's the same principle. It's like it relies on you not having all of the facts and just a little bit of feelings to like patch up the rest of it because it just sounds right or it corresponds to your personal perspective.
Yeah. Okay, well, going back to like what you just said, which was the fact that like because he's so like inherently wrong here, that I should begin to question like a lot of the stuff that I agree with him on, or like I guess everything that he says in general. The stuff that I usually cling to is the more of just like the philosophical, psychological like self-help stuff, which I've said a number of times during this. So like if I were to apply this concept to something that maybe like I agree with what he said, like we've used this example a couple of times, but the getting your house in order before you criticize other people's problems and whatnot, like how like that's a pretty like easy like snippet of wisdom to kind of take. So is there like something inherently wrong with those kinds of ideas that maybe they need to be looked into greater, or do you think that there's like a level of like common sense almost that we can just afford to Jordan Peterson?
So what Jordan Peterson is talking about when he says get your house in order before you criticize someone else, and the reason why I didn't fully get into this is because the Holocaust stuff was more interesting, but the application, the political philosophy element of that from Jordan Peterson's perspective, which he, by the way, if you ask him, will very clearly tell you, because he literally uses that example when he's interviewed by other people who ask him about his political, not his political philosophy, but when they ask him about his like perspective on collectivism or collective action of any sort. He'll say that these people haven't fulfilled their own destinies in their own lives, or they're uneasy because they haven't had the satisfaction of personal achievement or whatever, and that's why they're criticizing the system. And that is not necessarily the case. There are plenty of people who have achieved, like, that's really a fucking broad generalization, and it's really awful to just fucking categorize every instance of collective action, which is responsible for all of the good things that we take for granted today, even all the fucking conservatives take for granted today, like the 5-day work week, or the fact that the fucking children don't work in factories, or the fact that women can vote, the fact that women can be, or the fact that we have some semblance of equality for people regardless of race, color, creed, unions. Like, all of these things are because we have progressed through collective action. So Jordan Peterson, in an effort to at least hold on to the status quo, in an effort not to upend it because he is terrified because the status quo benefits him greatly, is trying to vilify all collective action. And he does that with those very simple symbolisms, like these people, if they focused on themselves, if you focus on just yourself and you don't cast a stone at another house or whatever the fuck, you don't throw stones from your glass house, all these like all this like very obvious self-help shit, it's an extension, or it's an effort to make it so that you you don't really fucking get into you don't engage with the political side of things. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I kind of see what you're saying. I feel like a lot of the problems that you have with Jordan Peterson are these like foot in the door kind of scenarios where like
because
he'll
Jordan
say
Peterson's
something and
never
it's
makes
relatively
statements.
harmless. Yeah. And I think he does that on purpose. I don't think it's to like lead everybody into like this, or anyone who will listen into like this like very right-leaning Holocaust denial bullshit. I don't think that's what he's trying to do.
No, that's not what I said.
I think that normative claim. I don't know. It seems like you're pointing to this like more nefarious plot that he has or something.
Well, the plot is very simple. In the introductory point, he just wants to make fucking money. At its lowest impact, he just wants to make a lot of money, okay? And he knows that like there's a lot of mobilization around this sort of like propaganda, and he's already a social conservative, so it works perfectly well with him, with his like probably existing perspective. So that's the low impact element of it. At the larger impact, he probably has a delusion. I mean, I don't know. He probably likes the fucking influence, and he probably wants to change people's minds because he maybe genuinely thinks that like social conservatism or going back to our traditional Christian roots would greatly benefit society. You know what I mean?
An older friend of him also wrote a great article about how
Who?
Let me check. Who was a friend of his, and then Jordan Peterson came to him and said his wife had a prophetic dream about how it's 5 minutes for midnight, that he's the only person who can like change the outcome of some grand scale apocalyptic event, which is very real. Like, I mean, they're all like these little things that would like totally turn me off getting my self-help from that dude. I mean, Cody, if
or
like,
the fact that he's
something...
fucking eating nonstop, only eating meat and drinking.
Yeah, I mean,
that's dangerous as shit, dude.
Oh yeah, I know.
I mean,
the importance of vitamins in your system is really.
If you like get something positive out of Jordan Peterson's self-help stuff, I mean, by all means, just go ahead. I don't really mind that. That's fine. But like, I don't know, like so much stuff, like him saying he voted for Trump, his being like borderline illiterate on certain topics when it comes outside to psychology, but that he extensively talks about, like saying the Nazis were atheists and that sort of stuff. I don't know. I posted the article in the Discord if you want to check it out.
Well, he can't vote for Trump, but he said he would have voted for Trump.
He said he would have, and I think the reason that he said he would have was because Hillary played identity politics, which is something that he's. if
Come on, you know that's
correct.
funny, dude. That's fucking insane, dude. I'm gonna vote for Trump because, like, I'm gonna vote for a fucking dude who also played identity politics, but for fucking white people. Like, and by the way, when you play identity politics for white people, there's historical precedent that it is really fucking violent, dude. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, just like identity politics in general is probably a bad thing. Right?
Not necessarily. I think all politics is identity politics. You're just trained not to see that like white identity politics is the default, so you're trained not to see that as identity politics. Class is a part of your identity technically. You know what I mean? Like this is the foundational principle of intersectionality. Like you.
Yeah, but do you think that I think the problem he has with it is not necessarily that it exists, because everyone admits that it exists and knows that it exists. I think the problem he has with it is like the hyper focusing on it, right? And I'm not saying that Trump didn't do this. I'm just saying that this is what I think believes that he has a problem with.
But Trump was doing it. But Trump was doing it too. So why do you think?
Yeah, I didn't say
that Trump
wasn't
was doing it.
Well, maybe because of the reason you stated, which is because
because he's white.
White is the way to, like, the status quo is what you said, right?
Well, why do other people see it then? You know what I mean? Maybe they can't come to terms. No. Maybe they can't come to the terms, or maybe they can't frame it like Trump is doing white identity politics, but they at least know that Trump is a violent, dangerous, maniacal man One that has, especially a person like Jordan Peterson, who says that he not only has studied Nazis for 40 years, but also communism. He loves studying totalitarian regimes.
Yeah, he brings up
So
like
it's
Mao and
it's doesn't that surprise you that he's so fucking he's so angry at identity politics that he will literally vote for a proto-fascist? Like, isn't that kind of weird to you? Don't you think that's kind of weird? It's kind of weird to me.
Maybe I'd have to look into it more, but I think he draws like a very distinct difference between like identity politics of minorities and identity politics of because generally like
What?
I don't never mind. I don't feel comfortable making this argument because I haven't thought about it enough. And I don't want to like say something and come off as like a huge racist because I'm not, and I don't want to sound.
Oh, please do.
No, because
yeah.
Yeah, no, let me backtrack for a sec. Okay, we'll just leave it at like I think he draws a distinction between the dangerousness of identity politics between minorities and identity politics between.
Yeah, isn't that the whole thing of where he says if you argue for equality of outcome, that's the left equivalent to kill all minorities?
Yeah, he has said
right?
that. I love that. That was one of my favorite quotes.
Wait, where does he say that at?
Oh, here, I'll show you. He says, we know that, you remember when I memed in the beginning when I said, we know when the left goes we know when the right goes too far. I mean, Nazi Germany, many people being killed. But what about when the left goes too far? Well, I happen to think that a very dangerous idea is equality of outcome. That's literally what he said. I mean, we can find it. Hold on. I would rather find it actually instead of me just memeing.
Wait, I think that no, I think I've heard that. I think the whole argument was that because he wants to bring people closer to center, he makes the argument that like it's really easy to tell what like an extreme right-wing person looks like with the anti-Semitism and like Nazi Germany and whatnot. He was saying that it's a little bit harder to see what extreme leftism looks like, and in order to do that, he shows examples like Mao and Stalin, who lived in like communist regimes, right?
I'm not so sure about that. I mean, he said as soon as you start talking about equality of outcome, you should be put off the shelf. Like you're not part of the discourse anymore.
Yeah.
And like what Jordan Peterson sees as people arguing for equality of outcome, that's pretty broad. I mean, he said, if I'm not misquoting this, he said he can't see anyone in the Democratic Party that he wouldn't classify as far left at the moment, which is ridiculous. It seems to me just like he has this like hyper fixation on this red ghost of communism that is apparently a danger to society, while completely ignoring the danger to democracy that the right is currently posing at the moment.
Really weird, dude. It's
Well,
just
let's
really
go back
weird.
to-
Really
Well,
weird
let's
that
go back
he
to
hates communists a lot. Like a lot. You know who else hated communists? Nazis. I'm kidding. I'm memeing. But it's kind of funny that he thinks like fucking like I'm just imagining like Joe Manchin, the designated leftist fucking scourge of the Democratic Party, who voted for Brett Kavanaugh willingly, like in a very excited fashion. He marched over and he voted for Brett Kavanaugh.
Okay, wait. Let's go back to this idea of like equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome. That's something he talks about quite often. Like, what is the issue with taking people who want equality of outcome off the table?
Equality of outcome is just a substitute term for equality of opportunity in a place where equality of opportunity does not exist. In America, equality of opportunity does not exist. No one is starting. Equality of opportunity will technically never exist, but is especially so in America. Do you see what I'm saying? It's the same shit. It's just another way to be like, oh, well, you're just trying to force the outcome to be different. Equality of opportunity does not exist in a country where a country built upon white supremacy and severe. White supremacy.
No, I don't.
Genocide,
I don't think that's how
racism.
He's framing it. So like let's take it back to women in the workplace with this. So he perceives that, or no, he says that if somebody on the left says that half of all women should be CEOs, regardless of everything, because just for the sake of equality, right? He would say that is equality of outcome.
Who's arguing for that? Name
Jordan Peterson.
No,
Oh, I don't know who is actually arguing.
Yeah,
for
that's
that,
a straw man, though, dude. You know that.
Yeah, but he's giving an example of what what somebody on the far left is doing that would be too much. Just like he said, it's easy to point somebody who's on the far right. It's easy to draw the distinction and when to kick them out of the. What he's trying to do there is give a distinction on when to kick somebody on the far left out. When left is too left to be involved in the conversation. Seriously.
Yeah, but no one is arguing for. People who are on the far left aren't arguing for 50% CEOs that are female. People on the left, too far left, according to Jordan Peterson, are arguing for no CEOs.
Well, that argument does exist, though. So I mean, by the way, Cody, like, I'm from Europe. I'm from Germany, and some left-stream politicians actually are for like a women's quota in certain areas.
Yeah.
But you can be for and against that. That's all fine. There are good arguments against it and good for it. But would you be okay with classifying that as the left's equivalent of white people über alles? Because that's how Jordan Peterson said it.
Yeah, that's true. Fuck, I forgot. You're right. We should focus on the main subject. Yeah, that's very good, Daniel.
Probably not. I probably wouldn't agree with him there.
I mean, you were before, but it made sense in your head, though, right? When you heard it from Jordan Peterson and when you were repeating it earlier before actually thinking it through, it made sense.
Well, no, he asked me if women's quota is like equivalent to, or like having a women's quota in certain jobs is equivalent to, what did Jordan Peterson call it? You were asking if I agreed with that like specific thing that he said.
He said what the left says doesn't have the same guttural punch as white people über alles, and that's a problem. But that if you argue for equality of outcome, that's pretty much you're no longer part of the discourse. The same way that someone wouldn't be part of the discourse if he said white people über alles.
Okay, maybe I'm lost somewhere. What is
Well, I can't find the direct quote, but I'm fairly certain that he said, yeah, you admitted that you heard it as well. I can't remember what the fuck the exact quote was, but he said something along the lines of, "We know when the right goes too far, that's when there are Nazis. We're trained to see that. We don't know when the left goes too far. We haven't been able to figure that out. Well, I happen to think equality of outcome is when the left goes too far. And equality of outcome, as Daniel mentioned, would be a diversity quota, right? In some instances, I agree with it. In some instances, I don't. I don't really give a shit about like 50% female CEOs. It's redundant to me. I mean, it's foolish, but whatever. But let's say we did say that 50% female CEOs is a mandatory fucking thing that we put out there. According to Jordan Peterson, that is the leftist equivalent of going too far. So we're asking you, does that ring the same alarm bells?
Oh yeah, if it's like a 50% quota on women CEOs, like that is what we have to like hit the mark, or there's going to be consequences. If that's what that person's stance is, then yeah, I think that would be too far. You maintain the position that it's still not as crazy as, genocide, right? Like, is that on the same level as genocide? No. No, it's not on the same level of genocide, but that doesn't mean that that line of thinking might not lead to something equally. I'd be hard pressed to give an example. So I mean, my argument may be really, really bad. Equality of outcome equality of outcome is still I already had this conversation with you earlier, kind of, where I was talking about like the difference between communist ideology versus the difference between Nazi ideology, and like the ultimate goal, even though it was achieved through violent means in some instances with like Stalin and Marxist Leninism and whatever, but
the ultimate goal was still a much different goal than Nazism or you know what I mean, or fascism. That's the point that we kind of pondered around for a while.
Well, like, sorry, it's getting really late, and I haven't had nicotine like all day, so it's like it's getting tough to keep this up. But I'm doing my best. Okay.
Yeah.
So
You're doing great, dude. It's all good.
okay, so let's try and go in a linear fashion, right? So he's saying that that communism is like the super far left, like extra bad thing that we. Okay, so when is the tipping point that maybe we're going too far to get to that point? Well, it's when we have things like 50% quotas on CEOs, right? I mean, am I missing like the A to B here?
No, but don't you realize how ridiculous that sounds? That if you're talking about
you're saying
minority
that
quotas in a
inherently
capitalist structure, that's like getting closer to communism.
Well, I mean, communism is like equality. I don't actually have a super firm grasp on communism. From my understanding of
Understandable.
it's
You like Jordan Peterson, so
yeah, exactly. So like, so give me like communism basically, and then tell me how having like quotas on minorities or people who aren't usually in those job fields isn't communist.
I mean, why isn't that communism? I mean, I think if I remember correctly, I do like a bit of on YouTube, and I know that like a lot of the anti-SJW types, everything that has to do with like equality, often gets like put into the communism corner, because to them like that everything is equal. That's the goal of communism. But if like let's say you had a company like operating in the US today, where they had these quotas and everyone would earn the same. That has nothing to do with communism because it still exists in a capitalist structure. No, there is no free market in communism.
Yeah.
Jobs are largely given to people, and you wouldn't like need quotas. The state would just issue it.
Okay. Wait, you just said that in communism, jobs are given to people. Okay, well, if we're trying to fill a quota, we are giving jobs to people who maybe don't deserve it. That's where the line is drawn for me, right? Like not the distinction line, not like it's like the logical conclusion.
Okay, can I just step in here for a second? What I was gonna say is, no, like, dude, there's no 50% female CEOs is not a communist quota. You know what a communist quota would be? 100% of the CEOs either willingly give up their wealth, so it's fairly redistributed back to the people, or they get fucking executed. That's the communist, or not, and that's not even like, that's only one form of communism, and some people say that it's not even real communism, which would technically be the USSR, which would be more of a Marxist-Leninist perspective, which I don't personally agree with, but the ultimate end in that utopia would still, communism questions, why do CEOs exist? Yeah, exactly.
I was just gonna say, like, if you're saying this is communism, you always have to keep in mind that like the idea of what communism is much like like in American discourse is very hazy what that actually is. Like, is it the USSR? Is it North Korea? Is it East Germany? Is it that what Marx cooked up? So yeah, just keep in mind that like there isn't like one set of communism where there's like a set rule and then they go, this now we have communism.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, there are a few staples of communism that like make it easily definable, and that like definable as communism. Maybe not the communism. There's a few things that they all have in common.
What would you say is the commonality?
Well, I mean, they're all given jobs, right? Their jobs are basically, and then whether or not they are like paid for that job or they just receive like the benefits they need to live. I think that changes, doesn't it? But like the fact that like your job is basically given to you.
I mean, it was kind of like that in East Germany. I'm not sure how it is in North Korea or the USSR, or even how Marx imagined it. I think Marx imagined that you can do pretty much every job in communism because you would just do what the society needs you to do. So you could just like be a baker in the morning, and the next day you'll be a tailor or some stuff.
Yeah, and then you could focus on your own like personal development, and arguably would yield more individualistic results than or better results for individuals than our current 9 to 5 rat race or whatever the fuck it was back in Marx's time. But and that's the draft. Okay, we're getting into like theory, and we're getting into like the differences between Marxist Leninism.
Well,
and,
we
and
have
just,
to
like,
get kind of like nuanced in order to argue that.
Well, the point is, the main point that Daniel was trying to make is that what Jordan Peterson says is communism is not, or what a lot of people on the right say is communism in America is not fucking communism. Even communists have disagreements sometimes as to what communism would be or is. There's 308 viewers in this chat. Some of them are communists. They will fucking tell me that whenever I talk about socialization, they get upset at me and say that taxes or socialization is not socialism. Like, you know what I mean? There's like, I mean, and it
Yeah,
really
but I
isn't,
think we're being really, really unfair to the one side. So I'll try and demonstrate this.
What one side are we being unfair to?
Okay, so he's saying that it's too far when on the right, when people begin to become anti-Semitic, right? Which there's a huge difference between saying I hate black people and like marching in places to like actual genocide, like Nazi Germany genocide, right? So there's those two distinctions. He goes, this is when it's too far, which is anti-Semitism, and then that anti-Semitism leads to Nazi Germany, which is like even farther than that, okay? And then he said the same thing with the left side, which is like, okay, well, as soon as we have equality of outcome, that I think is the tipping point, and then the final extension of that would be like Mao's communism.
But why doesn't he just say, you know what would be like the far left equivalent of white people über alles would be execute all capital owners and confiscate their property. Like we know what this looks like, and it's in the US it just doesn't exist.
No, because you're comparing two different like okay, so you're saying that like
wait, he's very specific about Nazis.
Well, you're saying that like I hate black people is comparable now to like executing people. Like there's a huge difference between those two things.
No, that wasn't
in severity.
No, he
by the
literally
way,
said
just
Nazi. He used Nazi Germany as an extreme of the right.
Just so you guys know, and in chat, like when I'm live, I sometimes struggle to find like the right English words because this is my first language, but I try to be as precise as possible.
Don't worry about
it,
dude.
I wouldn't understand why Jordan Peterson chooses equality of outcome when trying to find a leftist equivalent to white people über alles, instead of saying we need to get rid of all capital owners and confiscate their property. Like that's what actual far leftism is, and I don't know why he like categorizes that way. Maybe so because he sees the left like as a bigger threat to democracy than it is in the US. I wouldn't know.
No, he does, which is why I'm annoyed by it, which is why I think he's a piece of shit right-wing social conservative. Everyone in America is already a fiscally conservative for the most part, or like a lot of people in North America are already fiscally conservative. So like most conservatives are just on top of that also bigoted. So like if we're being honest, that's what Jordan Peterson's perspective is. You know what I mean? Like he's not like... He literally has said that Hillary Clinton I did identity politics, so that's why he would have voted for Donald Trump. Like, what else do you need to know in that instance? Hillary Clinton is the most conservative Democrat we could have ever fucking put up. Like, there are so many better things you could criticize Hillary Clinton on, but if your entire framework, the way you analyze the world is exclusively around who's doing identity politics and who's not doing identity politics, when everyone's fucking doing identity politics. But in Jordan Peterson's world, who's doing identity politics like the SJWs, like as if he's Sargon fucking Akkad or some dipshit anti-SJW YouTuber.
No, it's not. It's like, not just identity politics, like blanket statement. It's like extreme identity politics, and he thinks the left is doing it in a way more extreme way than the right.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's crazy, dude. How can you say that's... I mean, how can you sit here and think that that is a normal comparison to make? What's the left doing identity politics in an extreme... How is the left doing identity politics in an extremely fucking devastating way in comparison to the right, who are literally marching on the streets, screaming blood and soil, when the administration, when our current government is tear gassing fucking migrant caravan work... I mean, people that walked 1,000 miles to come to America and legally seek asylum. We fucking tear gas those people. And if you're gonna sit there, turn around and say, you know what, the left really is going too far because Lena Dunham has another fucking movie coming out. Like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? You have to be psychotic, or you have to be like kind of a Nazi, I guess. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's kind of crazy to just exclusively... This is my main gripe with all of the anti-SJW YouTubers, too. It's like, Republicans, despite being the moral minority in America, okay? Despite being outnumbered...
I'm not God.
Republicans currently control all levers of power, okay? They're court packing. They don't have the House of Representatives anymore, but beyond that, they have for the past fucking 2 years. So, and the things that they've done so far are devastating. Massive tax cuts that will yield terrible results and exacerbate income inequality. Separation of children from their parents, legal asylum seekers' children from their parents, not reuniting some of those children with their parents. As a deterrence,
the number, like 14,000 kids right now?
Yeah, as a deterrence policy, like just unimaginable cruelty that the United States government is doing, and also continuing to do unimaginable cruelty that it has been doing under Barack Obama and under George W. Bush. And to turn around and say, man, the left is going too far because this already marginalized group of people, trans people, how dare they not get misgendered by someone like myself in my classroom where I hold a position of power over these people? Like, how dare they demand not to be misgendered? How dare they demand that they don't fucking fight every single day to justify their existence? Is insane to me. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, is that really the biggest issue that's impacting not just American society, but is that really the biggest issue impacting our planet right now, dude? The planet is like, America is on fire in places where it's not underwater, and we have a government, we have an administration that refuses to acknowledge that climate change is happening. And Jordan Peterson's also doing that, by the way. He's also somehow a fucking climate change denier too, which I don't know how these people always find themselves also.
I don't think he's ever outright. Has he outright claimed that?
We can go into that in a second too. He never said like.
Just send me a clip later.
All right, I will. But like to turn around, and we have fascists being elected into positions of power in places like fucking Italy, in places like Brazil, and Jordan Peterson is still focused on blue-haired SJWs on college campuses that will probably grow out of their hysteria once they leave college. Who has more power right now? Who is causing more devastation? And also, if those blue-haired SJWs who are quote-unquote hysterical, if they were to hold any sort of position of power, what would be the most devastating thing that they push for? I would.
Well, I
maintain the position that it would. Okay, but we already went over C16, right?
Yeah, but you were talking about like what
C16
damage did
already
they do or
had.
whatever.
C16 already existed. It's not like a radical thing.
Yeah, I know, but you asked like what power would they? Well,
it was a rhetorical question.
They had already passed it in.
Yeah, no, the reason why, first of all, it wasn't the blue-haired SJWs that passed that, but
no, but it was somebody who agreed with them.
Yeah, so C16 passed, but it's not like, what's the outcome of that? You know what I mean? Can you make the comparison that C16's passage is anywhere near as devastating as tear gassing migrant children or normalizing Nazis from the bully pulpit by saying there were very fine people on both sides?
No, I don't think those two things are comparable at all, which is why I believe the border stuff has gotten way.
Yeah, but why does Jordan focus on one and never on the other?
I just don't think that maybe border politics interests him.
Yeah, but he has such he uses such like I don't know, he uses such hyperbole, like he uses such extreme terms to describe the devastation caused upon Western society by identity politics and the foundational tenets that of like this fake thing that he created, neo-Marxist postmodernism, which is inherently conflicting, but it's fine, I guess, in Jordan Peterson's world, where we're pushing for multiculturalism, diversity, all of these things that are breaking Western society apart. Are they?
Maybe not to the doom and gloom that he expresses it now, but I think what he sees is the precedent, right? Which is kind of what we started the conversation with.
But what
well, this
precedent?
sets a precedent. The precedent is like, oh, this is similar to the, or his claim is that the actions that we're taking now are similar to like the societal actions that were taken that led to the communist countries that he doesn't like.
Can I give you like my take on this? Why he does that? Like
Go ahead,
how I
Daniel.
like imagine in my head what he thinks about that. So it appears to me that Jordan Peterson has spent a lot of time studying communist regimes like the USSR, and he now studied it so much that he starts to see it everywhere, and gets like blinded for the worrisome developments that go on around him. You know. You have in the US, you have a proto-fascist president who talks about ending birthright citizenship. In Brazil, you have a literal fascist threatening democracy and making light of the military regime, which terrorized the country for more than 2 decades. And Jordan Peterson says the threat to the West right now is the college students that want to make me call them a different pronoun. I mean, don't you think that's like a bit ridiculous?
What's that Rick and Morty quote? It's like anything can sound ridiculous if you word it the right way.
Yeah, but
dude,
I'm just
okay,
I'm just talking about his like priorities, like that what he focuses on.
It's too fucking late to keep having this conversation, dude.
Okay, dude.
No, I want to come back because I feel like I can do. I'm gonna go grab some nicotine tomorrow morning or this morning, I guess. I don't know. I'll drop in if you see me and you're ready. We'll
I'm ready,
do it
dude.
again, okay? like as soon as I get some nicotine in me, I'll be able to follow better. Like I don't.
We'll do another one.
Okay, I'm ready. I mean, this one was what, 3 hours, so it couldn't have been that bad of a conversation.
No, this was great. This is great. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, I'll be back more prepared. Nicotine flowing through the veins, Jordan Peterson on the brain, and we'll hash it out again.
See ya, Cody.
See you guys. Have a good one.
Thank you for this conversation.